Trouble getting it. Well, there we go.
There
Now
you go.
Good. Thank you. All right. So I want to cancel that. All right.
So how does my slide look? I went and spent some money yesterday on slide model to put these slides together.
What did you do? Tell me again.
So this is the digital age, right? So we talk about digital age. So now there are these sites available where you don't have to, be an artist to build your PowerPoint templates. And you can go out there and subscribe to it. And not only do they have a plethora of templates, but you can actually have a service where you say, hey, I want this template, and this is kind of like what I'm thinking. And they have a team in the background, which they build it and send it to you. Isn't that awesome?
Interesting. Yeah, I've got to tell you, being from Texas, I'd much rather see mountains and grass and cattle, but that's
Come
okay.
on, you're talking to a New Yorkian, right? Like, so I'm only talking towers here. So.
Yeah, I know. Except you've lost half of the citizens in your city, haven't you? And but anyway, that's another story. Just kidding. But you're in the middle of a mayoral race. Good for you. Okay. No, it looks nice. It looks very nice. Good deal.
Awesome.
So, I think let's go ahead and get started. And Jean, thank you so much for everything. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. And Shubo, if you may want to stop sharing your screen at this point, and that way Harvey can we'll see Harvey displayed on the screen. Thank you.
I've become become a Zoom expert by now. Thank you, Jim.
No worries, and thank you. So welcome everyone. We're going to get started back to Privacy Mornings Saturday Privacy Mornings. We used to do this before. I was telling some of you remember, I hope. I used to go out to Taco Bell, bring a couple breakfast tacos in for everyone, some churritos, and I like that a lot better, quite honestly. But we can't do that now, and it's nice to get up a little bit later anyway. And so here we are. And I want to go ahead and just tell a quick story again that I did just a moment ago. And I'm going to tell probably another story. Then we're going to have some, let's see, Jean, are you on? I'm changing things real quick.
I am on, yes.
Yeah.
Good morning.
So yeah, thanks. And so, yeah, Jean is our admin and very helpful in all of this. So is there a way that we can kind of unmute everyone just for a little bit to talk? How can we do that?
Yes, there's not sure. I just see the mute all, ask all to unmute. You may see it, but I don't see anything to unmute everyone, but we can individually, we can
individually unmute.
And individually unmute, correct.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Morning.
We'll do that. So if all of you can see the to see the participants, then we'll go in order from I guess from the top of the participants, knowing that everybody is first. So we'll choose someone to go first. Is that fair? Is that what we should do, Jean, you think?
I think that's a great idea, Harvey. This
Okay.
You're the host, so
I know. I'm just trying to
after you and me on this list would be our speakers.
Yeah, and it would be a lot better to do it in person, but we'll get back there someday. So what I want to do is just to have a little bit of open discussion, but also let everyone go around and introduce themselves very quickly. I've done this briefly with a few, but go ahead and introduce yourself again for everyone. Just identify yourself, your company, and what your role is, how long you've been with ISACA, something to that effect. And we'll get this kicked off. Then what we're going to do after that is Shubo is going to have the first presentation on data governance. It's about 20-30 minutes. We'll have interactive discussion, and then we will continue discussion probably at least until the hour, because this is going to take 15 or so minutes, probably 20, 30 seconds at least a person. And we'll try to take a 5-minute break each hour. And then we'll go in and fully discuss data governance. And then Jeff is going to come on and talk about a combination of both 853 with NIST and the privacy controls and compare that to ISO 27701. And we're going to have a very good discussion on that. Go to the top of the hour, take 5 minutes break. And then I'm going to utilize and share with you a good resource I found. I recently wanted to get caught up on CCPA. I wasn't caught up on it after the AG. I had helped implement at a company, but then the AG came in and made their changes, and I wasn't caught up on that. And I found a slide from Troutman Pepper that compares the new CDPA from Virginia with CCPA and the planned CPRA. So I think that'll be a good discussion and a good resource to everybody as we go through it. So my name is Harvey Nusz, immediate past president. Love these Saturday privacy mornings. I've been in privacy for about 6 years now after helping a company prepare for GDPR. And prior to that, with my cybersecurity compliance background, it helped companies get implemented with all other forms of regulations. And I've been actually was on the charter member of our ISACA chapter. So been with it a long time, actually moved out of Texas a while, but came back. And I am now helping companies get compliant with privacy in the area of doing assessments, doing DPO services, and so forth. So let's see. Jean, why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself and all that you've done for the chapter. Everybody knows.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jean Swan. You may have heard my name mentioned in some of the calls with Ted. I am the chapter admin for the ISACA Greater Houston chapter. Thank you, Harvey, for bringing me on board last year. So I didn't get to participate in many in-person events, or any really, but have been with you guys throughout the virtual year. So I'm on LinkedIn. My background is in project management and IT, and I have attended ISACA events prior to knowing Harvey. So it's been interesting. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Jeff, tell us about yourself. Jeff Sorrell.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Sorrell, and I'm a data privacy and information security consultant. I help corporate clients and organizations tackle their information security challenges as well as data privacy. I've served in a role as a data protection officer, advisor, as well as consultant for biometric security systems. Today, I'll be giving a presentation on a comparison between ISO 27701, which is the privacy framework, you could say, for ISO, an international standard, as opposed to NIST 853 and their latest privacy controls, and how they compare and map to GDPR.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. Shubho, you keynoted our one of the keynotes of our GRC conference earlier this year. Glad to have you back on. For those who don't know you, tell us about yourself, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Harvey. I hope you guys can hear me well because I just changed my location. So
yes,
sitting in a different place. Okay, so Shubho Goswami. People find it difficult to pronounce my name, so they call me Shubho. They've also been known to call me Steve. That's a fun fact. Now,
I like Shubho better, but go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so there's a story behind it, and I'll tell you during our presentation. So coming to myself, I've been working in the information security space for like a couple of decades now. I guess funny question around ISACA, that my relationship with ISACA started when I became a CISA, and then a few other things like C-Risk, etc. And CISM And that was probably, I don't even remember the exact year, but it was around 2000s. So it's like almost like 20, 21 years now. And I've been giving a number of, with ISACA, my relationship has been off and on. I've been with various chapters giving various, let's say, presentations, etc. I've done that before. And right now, I work in the data protection field, which is an overlap with data governance, data privacy, and other places. I work in a company called Encryption. Some of you may or may not have heard of it. I can tell you when you go for your home loan, you will have heard of it. So that's me.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Shubho. Cindy, you're an old hand at these things. You've come out there and eaten the breakfast tacos. How are you this morning?
Yes, I loved the breakfast tacos. I was considering going out this morning to get one just to have one on the air.
Love it.
But
Love
I
it.
didn't make it. I've been part of ISACA for over 15 years. I got involved back when I was a SOX compliance auditor, and I did that for about 10 years. Then I was working at Shell with other compliance audits. So for the past 3 years, I've been taking care of my husband's parents. They got wiped out in Hurricane Harvey, and then come to find out they both had some memory issues. So they've needed some help. I'm looking at a new horizon that's beginning to come into view where they will have additional caretakers and it won't just all be me. So I am looking to get into data privacy. I don't really know how to enter that field since I don't really have any experience, but I do have some audit experience. So I'm hoping that my compliance auditing experience will help me get into the field.
Oh, absolutely. I think we made some good progress last year with some of the things that we're looking into. So, and we'll be going over those again, privacy principles and privacy by design. So thank you, Cindy. Glad you're back again. It's great to be seeing people at least virtually and working on this. So thank you.
Yes. And I might encourage everyone, Harvey really likes to see your faces, so don't be afraid to share your video.
There you go. I like that. Thank you, Cindy. Absolutely. Ron Levine, how are you this morning? Ron, we'll come back to you. Afoma, how are you this morning?
Hello?
Ron, we've got you. Okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was muted. There's 3 places I can mute myself, but my name is Ron Levine. I've been involved with ISACA since 2008 and I became a CISM in 2018. I'm currently a cybersecurity architect for Modec, the Japanese firm. And my interest in privacy is just basically trying to understand the laws and what I need to know about them.
Excellent. Sounds good. We'll be starting to go through probably at least some of that today, and we'll be doing that. Thank you, Ron. Glad to have you here. I appreciate it. Afoma, are you on? Can you hear me, Afoma? Okay. I'll come back to you. Andrew Adelu? Are you on, Andrew? Okay, we'll come back to you, Andrew. We will like for everyone just to, talk to us. Andrew, you're unmuted now. Talk to us. Show your face. Okay, it's not working. How about our day? Scott De Candido, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can.
Fantastic.
Good morning. Quick bio. Apologize for the Saturday attire here, but Scott DeCandido, been a member of ISACA since in the late 90s out of school, IT audit. That's the first thing we got was our CISA. Year 1 SOX Northrop Grumman, I earned my CISM. Been a CISO for 2 oil and gas companies now. Got laid off through the downturn. Started off my own company, safecybersolutions.com, and on my 2nd privacy program rollout right now.
Excellent, excellent. So you're interested in privacy, right?
Anything that pays. Yep.
Got it. Well, as I said earlier, it's going to be big business. We don't have any privacy, but it's going to be big business.
Yeah,
Okay.
GDPR's and the CCPA is enough for me right now. So.
Yep, absolutely. Sure is. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay. Bena Matvinova. Am I pronouncing your name close?
Yeah, actually correct. Sorry, I was not ready for introduction today. Yeah, but yeah, you're absolutely correct, Bain Matvenova. A little bit about myself. I have been working with Schlumberger for the last 7 years. And previously I was an external auditor at PwC, Dubai. I was traveling quite for like 5 years, living abroad for like 17 years. So now I'm in Houston and I joined Houston chapter, met via phone with Harvey. And I think we know each other now. And yeah, I'm glad to be here. And I'm interested in privacy. It's something like, it's actually a new area for me.
Excellent. Excellent. Sounds good. Well, we'll be getting into all parts of it. Thank you,
Thank
Bena.
you.
Really do appreciate it. Barry Tracy, are you, can we get you to say hello a moment?
Harvey, can you hear me?
I can now. Absolutely.
These computers. Hey, so I'm out here in Central Texas. I'm a GRC analyst with Williamson County. I was living out there in the Houston area, but my wife and I moved out here to the Austin area about maybe four years ago. So at Williamson County, I'm primarily responsible for developing IT policies aligned with NIST 853, but also we have some privacy policies. We have the county EMS department that doesn't have a privacy officer currently. So I've been developing HIPAA policies for the county as well. And most recently, my main project has been developing this tool called Archer GRC. It's a risk management and policy management utility that we can use to track all of our IT risks and all of our existing approved policies. And I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. I'm impressed. Your county has Archer. That's a big system and can be a bear at times, but I hope you have fun with it. I think you will. They've got some good modules that you could implement.
So the state offers a cloud version of Archer GRC, and that's what we have. We purchased a license for that, and that's what we're implementing.
Oh, excellent. Very good. Thank you for that clarification. Good to know. Glad you're here. And it's good to know we've got some people outside of Houston and they actually moved before the pandemic. So that's cool. Thank you. Beji, Jacob?
Yeah, hi, Harvey, can you hear me?
I can.
Good morning to all. It's indeed joy to be here with you all. I'm trying my best to put on my video here. I guess I'm having trouble. My apologies. I better test it before I come next time.
No worries.
But, yes. So myself, BG, as Harvey said, my people say Benji, Benny, but myself BG as in letter B and G. Okay, so that's how it is pronounced. Now, I'm here with working as senior site reliability consultant for the Entergy Corporation, energy company based out from Louisiana, and I'm as their application layer 7 and a layer 3, layer 4 devices, iOS vulnerability management, which I do on a day-to-day basis, and provide them the analysis and also the remediation for the vulnerabilities that is seen from these layers. So that's about 1,000 high level of my work that I do on a daily basis. I'm here, as Harvey was saying, privacy is just a thing that is not firmly footstepped or basically looked at. So I'm here to do all that can be done for getting a better environment where we work. So that's about me. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I very much appreciate that. Good to have you. We may want to talk with you further to see if you may want to speak to us sometime on some of those subjects. You're into some very interesting areas. So thank you very much. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And
Thank
sorry
you.
for not pronouncing your name right. Thank you.
No, you're right.
Okay. Thank you. Carla Hodge, long time no talk. How are you?
Good morning. Yeah, it's been a while. So the last 17 years, I've been working in internal audit, fraud, compliance. Loved it. Now I currently work at USAA as a director of business risk and controls. My main responsibility is, I have two main responsibilities. One is to help the entire company strengthen their controls with a focus on automation. And the other responsibility is within my organization, we have a little over 1,000 controls, and I'm responsible for driving the testing of those controls.
So also, I'm glad you joined, Carla. You tell us quickly about a presentation you gave before, and we were going to have one again, but tell us about that presentation. Some people may not have heard it, and we may want to have it again.
Sure. So
Yeah.
I was also involved with I would say, a artificial intelligence, RPA, all things digital type transactions tool called Alice. The tool helps and facilitates automating testing of controls. So it makes it very, very easy to test controls because it's all automated. There is some level of intelligence where, as an auditor, all you really have to do is review the results, but it's a highly intelligent tool. I know there's some competitors out in the field, but based on what I can tell, Alice is one of the better ones, and it's very, very inexpensive. I actually use Alice at a company called UiPath, and I was very, very happy and thrilled with the results.
Excellent. Thank you. Glad you're joining, and
Glad to be here.
thank you. We'll definitely get in touch again. Thank you. Christian, tell us about yourself, please. Does that work now? Should I come back? Okay, next I'll come back to that. Next I see Cyborg. Help me understand. Good morning. Okay, Doug Deputy. You're not shy, Doug. How are you, man? You attended our stuff before. You had the breakfast tacos. And also, I want everybody to know that Doug Deputy is a very good privacy guy, and he's probably going to be able to give us a couple updates on SHREMS too. He's got a couple of certifications from IAPP. So Doug, thank you so much for joining.
Well, thank you for that introduction. As Harvey said, I am an IT compliance and data privacy manager at a company called Distribution Now. I've been working with SOX compliance since what, 2005 or so.
Oh yeah,
and then,
we did it together.
Yeah, that's right. And before that, I was a computer programmer, so I'm an IT guy. Then moved into data privacy once GDPR started to be a thing. and have been mostly dealing with data privacy ever since. I'm just kind of trying to figure out what other people do with their data privacy programs, how they're set up, and so forth. Just kind of figure out what folks are doing and what we should do better.
Do you have a couple of, could you just give us a little bit about SHREMS too, the aftermath, you know, coming forth with I think you told me the other day, there's going to be some SECs standardized being issued pretty soon by the EDPB or somebody. Could you just speak about that a moment?
Well, sure. And I don't know how much everyone is into data privacy and keeping track of it. At our company, one of my assignments is to watch the news, see what's happening so we don't get surprised. We were surprised by GDPR and only had a few months to get ready for it. So SHREMS 2 is something that threatens data transfers between the EU, from the EU to the United States, and in fact to just about every country. The EU is moving towards data localization in essence, and towards making their mark in the IT world. They feel like they don't have a big enough chunk of the IT pie. And so the SHREMS ruling, it was a ruling about privacy shield and about standard contractual clauses, you know, the ways that ways that folks implement data transfers between the EU and the United States. And basically it invalidated those methods, saying that the laws regarding, you know, basically spying on people and the FISA regulations that allow folks to allow the government to request information, to demand information from companies like Microsoft or what have you, are not in line with the EU regulatory. They're not fair. They're not in line with the EU laws. There's no recourse for EU citizens if we spy on them, in other words. So what they can do is basically stop the transfers. For example, the Portuguese DPA, Data Protection Authority, is basically stopping data transfers for a certain company because you know, they feel like that company is exposed to the risk of U.S. government spying. Ironically, the UK may be about to be found adequate for data transfers, and yet they do much the same thing. And honestly, many of the EU countries do much the same thing. So it's ironic that they're picking on us. But I feel like the reason they're picking on us is because we have the internet infrastructure. We're greatly advanced with internet software and commerce. And so they're trying to even things up a bit. So I had several things I sent to you, and I don't remember what they were, Harvey. Let's see.
One was the SCCs. You're saying that's going to come out soon.
So standard contractual clauses, they're updating standard contractual clauses because they have not been updated since I think it was, I don't know, 2000 some, early 2000s. Standard contractual clauses are one of those methods that they use to ensure that transfers to the United States and other countries are going to be secure. They hold people accountable for making sure that they are secure. Also, along with that, are soon in June are going to be EDP SHREMS recommendations. Those should come out. And another little bit of news that I sent to you was that I talked about the UK, which of course we all know about Brexit. The UK is likely to be found an adequate destination for transfers from the EU, and yet the EU Parliament is objecting and saying, hey, wait a minute, the UK is like the United States. States. They are spying on EU citizens, and EU citizens do not have recourse. So that's the news. That's all I can think to say.
Excellent. No, that's perfect. Thank you very much for that. Barry Tracy, you said you're online again. Why don't you go ahead and go next? And thank you. Barry? We'll come back to you in a minute. Afoma?
Hi.
Oh, hey.
Hello. So my name is Afoma Owama, and I've been in the IT space for about 4 years now as a ServiceNow administrator and developer for about 4 years. I've been working with Appian Brand, and I'm very excited about the privacy because I believe it's one of those things that's going to help with the whole data breach that is on the rise. So I'm really interested in privacy as a whole, and I'd like to know more.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, we all hope it's gonna help in that. And there's some related topics we'll try to work in and get to today, including the famous solar winds and the now famous Colonial Pipeline, which are all, affecting us with breaches. So thank you. Barry Tracy, thank you very much, Afoma. Barry Tracy, are you available now? No worries. We'll come back. George Arthur. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Okay, Gloria. Somebody's coming on. Who is that?
Good morning, this is George. Can you hear me?
George, we can hear you. Thank you, sir.
Hi, it's good to be here. I got into IT audits with ISACA in 2003. I've been in doing external audits, and I got involved in privacy in the early days of HIPAA up in Washington, D.C., preparing the government agencies for the HIPAA compliance. And I got up there for a few years, and I'm back in cybersecurity right now, so I'm excited.
You're breaking up a little bit, George.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Yes, I said that I got into cybersecurity and IT audits in 2003 with ISACA when I got my CISA, and I've been in external audits, and I got involved in privacy during the HIPAA days in 2004, working with government agencies up in Washington, D.C. And so I'm excited about this workshop for today to learn more about privacy. Thank you.
Sounds good. Who are you with, George?
I'm with a CPA firm called BCA up in Maryland. I work remotely from Houston.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Greg Goings. Are you on? Greg? Iniolua. Jonathan Boyette.
Good morning, Harvey.
Hey, I like that. Very deep voice. Good morning. How are you?
Doing very well. So my name is Jonathan Boyette. I am actually an IT auditor with Phillips 66. I am CISA and CDPSE, recent CDPSE, obviously. I am the subject matter expert for privacy and automation in our internal audit group. So that's essentially what I'm here to do. Listen, learn, see how we can essentially apply those techniques and processes to our company.
Excellent. Thank you. Glad to hear that. How long have you been a member of our chapter?
Not too long. I want to say since 2019, something in that.
Oh, excellent. Very good. Well, thank you. Glad to have you here this morning, and we're going to be doing this once a month, and I look forward to, I'd like to reach out and chat with you later too. So thank you very much.
Sounds good.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Harvey.
All right. Juan Elizondo?
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Thank you.
Let me see if my camera turns on. Hi, good morning. My name is Juan Elizondo. I'm a senior manager from Accenture Security based here in Houston, Texas. I joined the Greater Houston chapter, ISACA chapter in January. And I've been with Accenture for 10 years, serving in roles in security compliance like ISO and NIST, GRC platforms like Archer, security strategies, security risk management, and then privacy once GDPR became a thing, and helped our clients in GDPR readiness assessments, system configurations, workflow, organization designs to respond to privacy. And currently I serve as our leadership for our high technology industry, where I bring our Accenture security to our high tech clients.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Juan. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Julie, I may be mispronouncing your last name. Bell? Sounds like a good German name to me, but I don't always do well in pronouncing that. Are you there, Julie?
I'm here, Harvey. Good morning.
Good
Apologies,
morning.
I ran out to a spin class, came home, showered, and jumped on. So good to see you guys this morning.
I'm impressed.
I've been a member in ISACA since 2015. I've spent the majority of my career in the energy industry. So I was director of global cybersecurity for BG Group, who was then bought by Shell. I was in that role for about 10 years. I left Shell and went to Deloitte & Touche and did cyber consulting for about 18 months. Then I heard about this great opportunity for a startup, or with a startup, at a company called Tellurian. And they were an integrated play where they were building an LNG facility in Lake Charles and then building pipelines out to the Permian to capture flare gas and buying $1 billion upstream company. So we were in the midst of procuring our final funding to move forward, and along came COVID and they had to cut 50% of the company. So I'm open for work. And I think Scott DiCandido and I run in some of the same circles in the energy industry. So it's good to see people that I've interacted with before, but that's me. Thanks for having us.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I appreciate your saying that you're in between successes, and anyone who else is, let us know. We're going to talk with Ted and get something going on that very soon, just that we can network together and so forth. So thank you. Thank you, Julie. Really appreciate that. Kevin Hall, my wingman last year, going to get you involved this year for Privacy Saturday morning starting next time. How are you, Kevin? Kevin, have you stepped away for coffee? Okay. We'll come back to you. Louis Filoramo, you told us briefly early, but nobody else heard you because they weren't on yet. So tell us about yourself, sir.
Been an ISACA member since 1985. I'm a CISA, also a CPA. Worked for ExxonMobil for 38 years.
Wow.
In IT audit as well as in financial auditing. And right now, we started with data privacy around the world, looking at it about 15 years ago when it was in its infancy. So retired now, but still trying to keep up with the issues at hand. So that's my background.
Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. Maybe we can entice you back out of retirement into privacy one day. So thank you. Thank you, Louis.
You're welcome.
Mark Ledman, you are now in North Carolina, aren't you, sir?
Yes, sir. Well, good to see you. You look terrific. I love the academic look with the beard, the whiskers. It looks very becoming. Very becoming.
Form follows function, but I'll tell you about that privately later. But thank you for joining.
I'm looking
so
forward
impressed.
to it.
Thank you.
And just a quick shout out to Barry Tracy. We used to work together, and Barry, you sound terrific. But I've I'm a CPA, and I started out doing operational and financial auditing many years ago, and just wanted to learn more. I realized early on that technology impacts processes and controls, and so I took the CISA exam, and just a little joke, when it was harder. I took it when it was harder about 22 years ago. I've been a CISA for about 22 years ago. And I'm very interested in any aspect of technology, but I have a keen interest in privacy. And it impacts so much what we do, and it's evolving now. Now we have 2 states with these privacy rules, so it's only expected to grow, right? Other states are going to add on and maybe have little variations. I'm also looking for work right now. I'm in transition. If someone, feel free to reach out to me if they're aware of something. And I just want to thank you, Harvey, for hosting these events on a Saturday. And I really appreciate all that you've done all these years in doing first-class education. And it's great to be a part of it today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it. We'll get you involved in our transition group that hopefully will get going soon. Sorry to hear that. And thank you again for joining. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Sorry about that, Harvey. I was having technical difficulties coming off mute.
No worries. I'm glad thank you. Talk to us, Kevin. Sounds like you're doing well.
Yes, thanks, Harvey. Yeah, so my name is Kevin Hall. I am, as most folks are doing quite a bit, or trying to do quite a bit. Right now, I spend part of my time helping out a couple nonprofits and helping them with their governance and IT space. Been in IT, and I started off in audit, actually, working with Bank of America a number of years ago, and have been transitioning into security and cybersecurity space. BP ran all of their secure environments and the like, and have been part of ISACA since 2019 when I first met Harvey, and went and decided to get certified in privacy during that time frame. So near and dear to my heart, at least as of late, and look forward to continuing my education and learning in this space.
Thanks, Kevin. I'll get you involved again in planning future meetings here, and thank you very much. Next, Meenakshi, am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, Harvey. Yes, I go by Meena. Let's make it easy on everybody.
Thank you, Meena.
Yeah. I started off as a financial auditor, and then I switched to IT audit because it was more interesting. And it was, I've been on the IT audit side for close to 14 years now. Mostly my experience has been in retail and distribution, and I did a year and a half in energy, and then I'm now back to the retail industry. I've been an ISACA member from 2015, and I work with the legal, the risk management, and the data privacy officers to, for the customer and the employee data. So it's good to know what's the new thing going on in the environment, in the data privacy space. Yeah, look to learn more, and I'm trying to take my C risk, preparing for it. Yeah, and hopefully it goes well.
Excellent. I bet it will. Thank you so much for sharing all that, Meena. Thank you for joining this morning.
Thank you.
Okay. Hola. Hola? Are you on? Olamide Williams, am I pronouncing that right? Olamide? Oluseyi Ah? I'm pretty sure I'm not pronouncing that right, and I apologize. Are you on? Okay, Patricia Conde. Patricia, would you like to
Hi,
say hello?
Harvey. Yes, it's Patricia Conde here. I work at BP in security engineering assurance services, where I manage the global team. So that's about it.
Well, that's good. You're interested in privacy, though.
Oh yeah, it's the key feature of our our activities. Yeah, of our assurance activities. Mhm.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. Paul Feather.
Good morning, everyone. I'm in Dallas, Texas. I'm in the North Texas chapter of ISACA.
Excellent.
Been in ISACA chapter meetings like this for many, many years, back in the days of SOX. I'm an IT network infrastructure guy, turned into an auditor during that time of craziness with SOX, and have been in internal audit, external audit, as well as IT risk. I do a lot of compliance programs for companies, helping them get their compliance programs up to snuff. And privacy is now a major focus. And we have done a couple of those GDPR assessments that are so deep and wide, it's hard to understand sometimes the depth of these kind of requirements. I do a lot of CMMC for the Department of Defense, a lot of security assessments, social engineering, pen testing, vulnerability assessments, those kind of things. But I'm very interested in learning more about privacy, and probably will not be a real focus of my practice. I'm an independent compliance guy, so I get hired out to help just any kind of company. But to have this background is very helpful to know some of the requirements that overlap between security, privacy, compliance, and such. So Harvey, thanks for having me. I'll try to be quiet in the background and listen as much as possible.
You're doing good. Thank you, Paul. Glad you joined us from North Texas. I was just up there on Wednesday. So thank you. Appreciate it. Peter Hill, my good friend and former, just previously president of ISSA here in Houston. How are you, Peter?
Good, Harvey. How are you doing? Thanks for putting on these great webinars. Like Harvey says, Peter Hill, I'm the past president for the past 2 years of ISSA, another good organization here in Houston. Been a member of ISACA for a number of years as well, C-Risk certified. Basically, career-wise, I worked for a oil and gas services company for 20 some odd years and got the COVID layoff in February. Thought I was going to retire like everybody else, and picked up a contract job with Technip FMC doing some cybersecurity risk analysis. So just trying to learn all the new privacy regulations and moving on from there. So glad to be here, Harvey.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate that. And Peter Olawui, I'm not pronouncing your name right, but we talked with you early. You were one of the first one on, and thank you. And tell us about yourself again, please.
Yeah, my name is Olawui Peter, and I'm with Navient, doing some internal control testing, and I've been a member of ISACA since 2019, late 2019. Yes, actually. Basically, that's all about me.
Excellent. No, that's good. I appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you for coming on early this morning.
You're welcome.
Raymond Ito, my new best friend. How are you, buddy? Tell us about yourself, sir. Must have caught Raymond getting coffee because he is not shy, I guarantee you. No, he's a good guy. He had been involved in he took the 8-hour seminar by Brian recently, Barnier, and I got to meet him after that. He really enjoyed that. So we were talking about that, but thank you. I guess you're not on now either, Raymond, right? Give you one more chance. Okay. Richard. Good morning.
Oh,
Hello. Richard?
Yeah, hold on, Harvey. I'm trying to.
oh me.
No worries. We'll come back to you, Raymond.
Can you hear me, Harvey?
I can. Thank you.
Yeah, I am mobile, Harvey. This is Richard Evans. Been a member of the Houston chapter since 2019 when I came back to the Houston area. In fact, after my first meeting, I decided to volunteer and actually volunteered for several of the events prior to COVID and so forth. My background is internal audit, both financial, IT, and so forth, SOX controls, internal controls from a broader perspective, interest in all of the requirements that will help organizations be more compliant, be effective in controls, and currently between jobs as well as a result of a recent acquisition. And so I'm glad to be here and looking forward to hearing the program.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. We'll reach out soon. Thank you very much, Richard. I appreciate that. Sanjeev, are you on?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, I live in Edison, New Jersey, and I have 15 years experience in IT audit, GRC, and cybersecurity. So I want to now get into privacy, and I am a ISACA member since 2005, and currently I am in between successes.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Good morning to you. Raymond, are you back on now?
Yes, sir. Harvey,
All right.
Thank you so much. And thank everybody. My name is Raymond Ito. I just started glowtiff.com. It's a cybersecurity company. Just listening to everybody here, the intellectual wealth that we have, just imagine. Listen, I'm going to draw on everybody. And Harvey, I just want to say that your passion for privacy is legendary. And oh yes, I'm going to draw on that a lot, and we're going to solve a lot of problems for our world. And I've been in cybersecurity for 10 plus years now, and I find myself involved in transportation industry. That got me very, very in close proximity to our local politicians. So all these politicians here and there, we do stuff together to get everybody in compliance and keep, maintain all these regulations and stuff. So, but eventually I decided to start my own company, cybersecurity, glowtiff.com, and definitely we're going to be doing a lot of things together. And I just became a member of ISACA for about a year now. I'm meeting all these great people, wonderful, Ted, doing all this great work. Harvey, I really want to thank everybody. You're truly doing an awesome job, and thank you. I'm here to learn from you, the guru. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raymond. Very glad you're here. As you can tell, Raymond is definitely a people person and an encourager. So thank you. Appreciate it. S. Bittens, am I saying that right? Did I get that right?
Almost. I apologize for my username. It's Soren speaking. It takes over my username, and I cannot change it.
No worries.
Cool. So I worked for 10 years as an information security architect for cross-border applications of the European Commission and the country of Germany.
Wow.
Primarily in the critical infrastructure domain, things like cross-data, patient records, communications, and what we needed in Europe at this point in time was an inline automatic translation of all this data, because you jump in a plane in Berlin, within 25 to 30 minutes, you're in another country. And you're exposed to a completely different language. So we had to connect international catalogs of the translation of clinical terms and everything. And we had to deal with a lot of privacy concerns, because different countries keep medical records in different ways. Some put doctor's notes in there that cannot be disclosed to patients, for instance. In some countries, in other countries, they have a right. to see this information. So for 10 years I did this, and then with the introduction of all the new laws, some of them have already been mentioned here, like the GDPR, EIDAS, the new telecommunication laws. Privacy has how to say, it has changed in importance. And for the last 3-4 years, I've moved from the architecture side more to the regulatory side. How can we make the technology workable? How can we make it compliant to the new regulations?
Excellent. Thank you. Wonderful. Sounds like you've got a real good background. Glad to have you here. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay. Teja Sweeney. Teja Sweeney. Am I pronouncing that somewhere near right?
Hey, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, hi. So yeah, Tejaswini is right. You can call me Tejas as well. I am an IT auditor. I do a lot of data audits, as well as privacy and cybersecurity related audits. I'm internal auditor for a bank. And I'm very, very interested in getting more into the privacy space, either as auditor or maybe as a solutions engineer. My background for past 10-15 years is mostly related to data project management and solutions implementation architecture.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Glad you're here. Tolu. Tolu, are you there?
Yes. Good morning.
Cool.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
My name is Tolu.
I'll talk to you later. Okay. So Frank liked his sweatshirt, his hoodie?
He did, yeah.
Good.
Can you send me some money for groceries?
Sure, how much?
On my Barclays. I don't know.
Barclays.
Or whatever, wherever.
Tolu?
Yes.
No,
I had some background noise. I was like waiting.
I can use my American
Yeah.
card.
So I'll
Okay, I'll
just
send
wait
you
a
to
little
Barclays.
because there's
Barclays.
Okay, thank you. I love you so much. I'll talk to you later.
Someone
I love you
else is
too.
talking.
Have fun revising. If you need anything, call me, okay? All right.
Okay.
Okay.
So are we good now, Tolu?
Yes. That wasn't me though. So my name is Tolu. I work as a compliance analyst for a company called DynCorp, well now Amentum. I stay in Dallas, Fort Worth. I've had a little bit experience with EPA while I worked with United Healthcare, and I'm just excited to be here. And I just wanted to say that my company is, I guess, we're in the process of hiring for a lot of roles based on the merger or acquisition and a lot of moving around. So you guys can look at Amentum soon. They'll be posting jobs.
Oh, okay. Thank you for sharing that. And what again is the name of your company?
Amentum.
How do you spell that?
AMENTUM, or it's if you click on DynCorp, it'll take you to Amentum because they just fused.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Excellent. Thank you for that. Glad you're here. Wonderful. And Veronica, we spoke a little bit earlier, but I'd like for you to say hello again now, please.
Okay, not sure if you're seeing me.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Not sure if I'm on the camera or not.
That's okay. No worries.
Okay. Yes, hello to everyone. I'm basically new. I'm in the In Between Successes group, being a member of ISACA since 2016, I believe, 15, 16, on and off, due to multiple responsibilities. My background is basically former IT MIS professional with current experience in healthcare,
Sure.
insurance, in life insurance, financial services, and banking training. So multiple in over 30 years. So I've been working for multiple businesses.
Excellent.
Always looking into opportunities for opening my own business and helping others, basically serving others as well. I agree with Raymond. He said intellectual wealth. Feel so privileged, and thank you for all your patience and support. It's very encouraging to be around all of you professionals and passionate about what you do. So I'm always looking forward to learn from all of you and continue moving on. See anywhere or anything that I can assist, I'm open to do so.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Very glad you're here. Thank you. Ewan. Thank you. Ewan, Y-U-E-N?
Good morning.
Morning.
I'll try to share the video if I can. Give me 1 second. I see I can do that.
That's okay. As my daughter says, 1 second's up. No problem.
If you can see me, it's all right. I'm Ewan Fusman, and I have been with the Houston chapter of ISACA, I think it's over 20 years, long time. And I have been working for Halliburton about 20 years. And I manage the IT audit organization for Halliburton almost like 11 years. So we do audit for every IT related areas, OT, cloud computing, security, privacy. So data privacy is only one other area that we are looking at all the time.
Excellent. Sounds like some excellent background. So thank you. I appreciate that. Zainab, Z-A-I-N-A-B. Zainab. Kingsley. Kingsley, are you there? Kingsley's iPhone. And that will be our last one. So thank you all for doing this. I think this took longer than I thought, but that's because there's more people here, which is good. And I think it's good to get some kind of level setting here, as we go through and start again the Privacy Saturday mornings, which we'll be doing at least on a monthly basis. So thank you all for that. And Shubo, I'm going to get ready and turn this over to you in a minute. So why don't you go ahead and get your slides shown up there. And I'm going to tell a quick story while we're doing that, while we're waiting for you to do that. And we're all ready. Good. So, I think if you're ready, Shubo, we're just going to let you get into your presentation. And let me just take a quick look at, good. Yeah, somebody was saying that it would be good if everyone could show their full name as the display name. So absolutely like to do that. Shubo. So Shubo, let me give a quick introduction again. Shubo gave one of the great keynotes at our GRC conference earlier this year. I've had a chance to talk with him since then and also during then, because he was also on a panel. And I think he brings a wealth of experience here. I'm going to embarrass him like this, but he's with experience. So Shubo, thank you for sharing this. And we want to make this an open, interactive discussion in a way. So put your questions in the chat and we'll pick up and go on from there. Thank you, Shubo.
Thank you, Harvey. And wow, this is a very diverse audience. And, I'm so happy to be presenting this note on data governance. It's a little different from a lot of expectations that, a lot of you are looking at data privacy. And I think there are, more conversations to happen further from here where we talk about, more deep dive into data privacy. But, just take a step back and look at the whole world of data, the digital transformation, and the data governance around it, and how that ties into data protection, data privacy, etc. So that's going to be a theme of my conversation now with you guys, and I'm looking forward to questions and answers and interactive sessions that we can do. So without much ado, let me start. Okay, that it not go well because it's not going to the next slide. Hold on, guys. Okay, there.
All right.
So we're going to talk a little bit about data governance, and a lot of you will be wondering, what is this data governance like? I mean, how does it relate to privacy? And we'll be talking about that association a little bit later. Data governance, it's about helping the business to use data. Now, why is the business using data? Well, this is the new world. This is the new world of the data universe, where organizations, companies, they get more shareholder wealth, they get more revenue, they do better performance if they are having insights into data. And hence, they want to use the data which is being collected. And that's diametrically opposite to the requirements of privacy and sometimes regulatory requirements, like we heard European Union, clamping down on what, let's say, US companies do, etc. So this is like, it's a balancing act. The ability of usage of data versus the regulatory privacy and corporate compliance needs, right? And data governance is about helping to balance those things. That's the best way I could put it. And I, it's an interesting story. I'll share with you guys that how I became interested in data governance. So I've been a security person, like, in broad-based security for 2 decades and more, and really focused on cyber, cryptography, data protection, and all of that, very specialized of late. And then I realized that when, as a global head for Experian, we are in like 40 countries across the world. And we are kind of, one of the larger data companies in the world today. We have privacy data of almost like a lot of individuals in this world. Maybe, a lot of you may have some data in Experian today. Now, when I look at my job of helping to protect all of that data, often the conversations come around data privacy. That, let's say the other day I'm having a chat with South Africa or with Europe. In Spain, you're having a new data protection law, which is preventing them from using some of the United States systems. So we get interested in data privacy and the right way of using that data and making sure that we are not crossing the obligations that we have signed on from a data privacy perspective. And then, interestingly, after that privacy discussions, and we suddenly have business teams coming to us and saying that, hey, we want to expand our business and we want to take advantage of the insights that we have in Experian on data, and can we use that? And suddenly, I'm in the midst of discussions. It's not just me, it's a whole team. We're in the midst of discussions of what's the obligations towards privacy, corporate compliance, regulatory requirements, and the business use. And that's where data governance comes in, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and about how to build a program. We are in the midst of building one. So I'm going to help you guys to visualize, take a step back, visualize what does a data-centric organization looks like? And when you're building a data governance program for a data-centric organization, what does that look like? Now that may or may not be your job function, but it does help you to gain an insight into that larger context and help you to understand data privacy. So what are the steps? What are the basics? Just like many other strategies, what's the purpose of data governance? Why do you want to have data governance? I just did speak a little bit about it, but we'll speak a little bit more about that. And this is very important to understand the organization and where it's going and the business alignment to your data governance program. So that's important. That's the first step. Once you know where you want to go and what does it look like, I can tell you this, like we've been having these discussions, and it's not just this organization experience, but many others. Nobody has the perfect answer to everything, but you got to start looking at a roadmap of things which you can determine. And while you're navigating the roadmap, you determine things which you cannot. It's very important not to get stuck in stasis of analysis paralysis that I can't get everything right. Now, talk about a roadmap. And once you have a roadmap, once you have a vision, a mission, and a roadmap, then you create the foundational structures for being able to get there. And there are certain foundational structures that you need, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in this conversation. And then with all of this, I want to introduce to us the digital mindset of the organization. Now, this is very interesting and very close to my heart. That I'm seeing this more and more with organizations. I'm going to give you a story about how digital mindset makes a difference and how each of you in your area are contributing to the digital mindset. So I have a friend of mine. His daughter is in digital marketing, and the organization which she works in, they were badly hit by the COVID situation because they depended on sales to shops, etc. They are in a particular confectionery business. Can I request everyone else to go on mute because I'm getting a little bit of a background noise? Thank you. So, as I was saying, that this friend of mine, his daughter, works in this this organization, which is actually a confectionery organization, which specializes in selling confectionery to various business outlets. Now she's in digital marketing. Actually, she's actually marketing. And during the COVID time, their sales fell drastically. And then the people of the organization, the heads of the organization got together and said, how do we save this organization? And she came up with an idea that they are going to transform themselves into a digital organization which will focus on confectionery from the sales cycle to the appeal cycle to the fulfillment cycle, all digitized. That means like an Amazon model. And she did that. And that organization, from almost collapsing, now had almost twice the sales it ever had. And of course, she got rewarded as the youngest vice president ever in the organization. But that's what I want to talk about, the digital mindset of the organization. And each of you make that happen. You couldn't have this digital mindset without information security, without data privacy, etc. We'll move to the next slide. Talk a little bit about deep dive into the data governance strategy. And I'm hoping that this will be useful to you when you build any strategy for your organization. I heard some people building strategies, while we went through all the introductions. Some people are building strategies around privacy. Some people are building around information security. Some maybe how to manage vulnerabilities in layer 7 or layer 3. All of those things, the basic tenets of a strategy are somewhat there, somewhat same. Start with, when you're talking about data governance, you need to understand what the business wants to do. And that's what we talk about, business alignment. That's true for any strategy that you build. So a lot of interesting areas today. Organizations are going for AI and ML. Harvey and I were just speaking about that yesterday. Harvey, you recognize that. So these are new times and new eras where organizations are moving from that traditional brick and mortar model to a digital transformation model. Brick and mortar doesn't mean actual brick and mortar. They may be, using IT for a lot of activities, but the digital transformation is a difference. It's about the entire strategy changing into managing of data, using data insights to build on the organization's strategy. So you need to understand where that's going. Then you need to look at what are your responsibilities around that, right? So the responsibilities may be privacy. And we talk a lot about the privacy, like it depends on your countries, the geographies. Different geographies are having different kinds of privacy regulations, which you need to know. And there'll be some conversations about that later on. Or even within the United States, you have 2 states going in for privacy regulations, and there'll be more to follow. So you need to know all of those. You shouldn't be surprised with it. You need to know your regulatory requirements, which come, there are some privacy regulations. There's some regulatory requirements, which are privacy elements are within them, right? Like, for example, PCI, HIPAA. These are regulatory frameworks in their areas, and they have a lot of privacy elements within that. So you need to understand that. You need to understand your security requirements. And those security requirements are set by your tolerance of risk. So all of this, you have to have this understanding by having conversations with relevant cross-functional stakeholders, like privacy with legal and privacy team, regulatory with, again, legal team. Some have separate regulatory teams, security with the security organizations, and then build your governance framework on all of above. Then we talk about the formulation of your data governance strategy. And it's important to understand this, that this has to be a top-down strategy alignment from the strategic aspect of business to the bottoms-up approach of data governance. And I'm going to say that this may seem sometimes, oh, somebody else does it, it's strategy, it's like consultants come in and do that. But in a way, you want to strive to a job function where you make a difference. And I think as an element of data privacy, you're a key component of the data governance strategy. And hence you need to understand this as much as anyone else. After you have understood what your organization requires, then you got to build the roadmap. And again, this is common to most strategies. But in the data governance area, focus is on discovery first, right? So narrate to you, like in most organizations, which I have seen, you have a lot of privacy, security, protection controls around data. You have a lot of rules around data. And all of them are great. But people really don't know where's their data. Very difficult to know exactly where your data is. Or what's the classification of your data? Like when you know where is the data, like, oh, it exists on these servers, It exists in these structured and unstructured repositories, larger chunks of data all over the organization, especially when you're moving towards a digital transformation. But are you getting everything? What happens? You can understand, like in a company like Experian, where I am, if you miss out one database, which may have 1 million records of people, that's a no-no.
Come on, boys, let's go up.
And we're talking about tens of thousands of such repositories. So to be able to know where your data is, and then what's the classification of that data, that's pretty critical. So that's first step in your roadmap, is to know that. Otherwise, how can you protect what you don't know where it is? So that's first step. Obligations. Obligations around privacy, regulatory, security areas. The data which comes to you in an organization, whatever you do, whether it's if you're in the oil and gas industry, information about, let's say, production, about location of certain structures, of performance, all of that. If you're in, and pardon me, I'm not an expert on that, so you guys might be thinking of many others which are possible there. If you're in the health industry, then there's patient data and all of that, right? There are obligations which come with collection of those data. Privacy obligations and regulatory ones. And we spoke about this a little earlier. All of that, you need to know that. And that, while in the first phase, when you're looking at it, you're trying to understand what are the obligations at a higher level. You need to build a roadmap where you collect the details of these and perhaps create matrices that these are all the things needed. I mean, something I think Harvey will talk about today, where he will compare a couple of regulatory frameworks. That's the kind of thing that you need to get down to, and that's a part of the roadmap, right? Knowing exactly every element of what you need to do and the security requirements. Then the other part is you now need to talk with, a part of the roadmap is enabling business. So when you have all of these two things in place, the discovery and the obligations, then you need to talk and enable the business to share data. Data sharing is not a small activity. Like, I remember this conversation where a business unit came to me and said, hey, Shubho, you secure data. Can you help us to share data? What should we be doing to understand how we can share data? And I had no answer because I hadn't done this strategy before. And then I started doing this. And to get there, it has been a journey. Once you have conversations with the businesses on what are they looking at? Are they looking at data training models for machine learning, for AI programs, for AI applications? Are they looking at data for inferences? Are they looking at sharing data across geographies? Those are the things that you need to build models around. So you need to look at business opportunities and talk with them. So notice data governance now has become a business function. It's no longer a privacy or security function only. And then from there, build up certain foundational capabilities. I'm going to talk a little bit about that foundational capability. Okay. So while I'm going through this, Harvey and everyone else, I'm going to just ask you guys that, is this making sense? Do you want me to go a little deeper, or is this level okay? Or, give me some feedback on, is this making sense to you all?
Yeah, let me jump in here real quick. I would ask everyone to mute yourself. There seems to be a lot of background noise. So if you would please, thank you. A couple people have, maybe you're not even aware that you're on mute or not on mute or away from your phone. I don't know, from your system. But
Harvey, as a host, you can mute everybody.
yeah, I was thinking about that right now, and I'm trying to figure out, and I think it may have
go on to participants, and it should give you the option to mute all.
Yeah, just remember, don't mute me, Harvey.
Well, you can unmute yourself, but you can mute everybody, and then you can just unmute.
Yeah, let me see.
It is Ron, you know, who should mute himself, Ron.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll mute all and then let you get yourself back, Shubo. And Jeff, do the same, please. And thank you. Thank you all. Okay. All right. Now, no, I think this is very good. I think you're covering excellent things here. I like what you said about it's a business function for data governance, but I would like for you to go ahead and expound on that a little bit, if you would. Is that fair? Does that make sense, Shubo?
I have a question, please.
Okay, I'm concerned I can't get Shubo back, but yes, what is the question? And tell me your name.
Okay, my name is Keith Garcia.
Okay.
And my question is, the presenter mentioned something about understanding your regulatory environment. That's easier said than done. I mean, I'm in the healthcare field, and from a regulatory perspective, of course, you have to deal with PCI, right? You have to deal with HIPAA, but other regulatory requirements depends upon associations and accreditations that come with your hospital. So here in Texas, we also have to be aware of particular House bills governing, protected health information and privacy laws. So I was just wondering, is there a way to kind of develop a roadmap of what your compliance, requirements are?
So yeah, let me start on that, and I hope Shubo is going to be able to regain his voice here, and I'll let him.
Yeah, I think that, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, awesome. So how do you want to respond to that, or you want me to respond?
Let me give a quick response. Sure. So it's all, again, I think, about discovering the data of what you have, but also getting involved with your legal department and probably outside legal counsel to help you understand all of the laws and nuances and whether you do need to comply with that. Shubo?
Yeah, and thank you, Harvey, for sharing that. And Keith, I think that was Keith asking that question. So
actually, Pete Garcia. Pete Garcia, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So so to respond to that, that's, it's very difficult in any organization and any business area that you're in. There are like a plethora of regulations and requirements and agreements that you need to look at. And this is a little bit of what we are talking about in this slide. If you notice that, they try to address that. You have country local regulations, you have client source agreements. If it's hospitals, you have individual hospital agreements, including, particular healthcare providers, payers, providers, all of them have their own agreements about what you can do with the data. How do you get to all of that? And as Harvey pointed out, you can't do this alone. You need this foundation. That's what I'm talking about, that when you're looking at it at a strategic level, if you're looking at it as an individual alone, you won't be able to do it. Because you need the set of people, you need the village to help you. And we'll talk a little bit about the cross-functional team that you need around data governance, right? But you need to be able to reach out to legal. You need to be able to reach out to the privacy team, if you have one, the internal audit team, and many others, including procurement and others. And that's how you would, start building up that framework. And if you're talking about how do you build that framework, how do you capture those regulations? Well, there are starts, that you have certain, you have these consulting organizations who have already built up some amount of frameworks on these, that these are all the set of controls that you should be looking at. And they call, it's just very similar to the common compliance framework. You have this common regulatory requirements frameworks that are built up. And, I've known of people who built it themselves in terms of, working with the legal teams, etc. And they've used tools like Archer, etc. And I'd be glad to, talk about how, that's not what I'm deep diving into, but happy to discuss that. I don't know the perfect answer, but happy to discuss that offline if that's necessary. Okay. Hope I answered the question.
And let me jump in real quickly, Shubho. Thank you for that. Before you continue, let me just say that, there's several frameworks out there, and I was involved in all 3 NIST workshops on the privacy framework. And you could do that in addition to the cybersecurity framework. But something I've found, and I confirmed this with IAPP at one of their meetings one time, was by talking with several attorneys. And my strong feeling about this is that if you put in a good set of privacy principles, FIPS or AICPAs, especially their version 2, and you include privacy by design principles, you're going to capture probably 85% whatever law will throw at you. But please, Shubho, please continue. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So that's the third part of it, which I call it as privacy good practices. Thank you for bringing that up, Harvey. So, I look at these frameworks as good practices, which you should be using. So on your left, you see these are the things that you would be looking at as foundational components. So you got to identify which ones you want to use. And then finally build it into, you have to review your company policies. Like when I look at Experian and I see that, when I'm building this out or when my team's building this out, then we often review the company policies and make sure they're aligned. Because ultimately, people within the organizations are not going to do all these 3 things on top, right? They're not going to go and look at regulations and source agreements and privacy good practices like privacy by design and other frameworks. What they're going to do is they're going to look at the company policies and say, how does that apply to me and what should I be doing? So you got to make it easy for them. And that's something which seen that companies increasingly not only do they develop policy, but they also develop something called baselines, privacy baselines. So technical privacy baselines, they call it. And they go down to even guidelines. And that's all published. So I would highly encourage organizations to do those so that it makes it easy for the people who are consuming that information, be it the business, be it other IT folks, or anyone else, or even the internal audit folks, etc.
Shubho, let me interrupt you real quick. Could you talk a little bit more about those technical privacy guidelines, what the source is, what you do as a company to put them together? Thank you.
Absolutely. So the way we put them together, that we create a cross-functional team, much like what you said, that, hey, we talking about, let's say, a privacy guideline for how to manage cross-border information flow between, say, South Africa and data centers in, let's say, UK. How is that going to work, right? So get people together, have the legal team. We also have a data governance team. And we have the data protection team, which I have, which I kind of manage, and others. And we get together and we have a framework for technical baseline, which talks about why are we talking about this, gives a background, a context, talks about the considerations that one needs to look at, talks about the sources, and very importantly, also gives the contacts of who to connect with when you have questions which you need answers. And it works out within that document. We kind of collect that these are all the common use cases that we've seen, and we detail those out. So one of the things that we do is that we then go back and have looked through the threads and what have been the discussions, what have been the usual questions asked, and what are the use cases which people actually look for. And you'll find that it's not more than 5 or 6 use cases. And you capture those use cases within the technical privacy baseline. And that's how you publish it. Sometimes we also involve outside consultants to help us, because we all have our day jobs. We don't have time to do all of that, right? So, be it, we usually have a project manager to manage that technical baseline creation. It's not one, but a whole bunch of them, as well as have some experts to help us in these fields. Harvey, do you have any suggestions or comments on that?
No, that's absolutely good. It sounded like we had another question though, please.
Yes, this is Keith again. So when you talk about technical privacy, baselines, are you speaking about the adoption of a framework, like a NIST framework or a high trust framework?
No. So the frameworks, so here's what happens, Keith. We've seen this, that if you refer to a framework at a policy level, you say that, hey, this structure should follow the high trust framework, or this is, this encryption standard should follow the HIPAA requirements or the PCI requirements, right? But you see, what happens is people don't really understand the PCI framework or the HIPAA framework or the high trust framework and can't go through that. So, and you don't want to copy frameworks, it's out there. So what you do is you take that and you convert that into thou shalt do these kind of statements in the technical privacy baselines. The whole idea of technical, at least in our organization, that's what it is. Technical privacy baselines are things which are easily understood, which do not have to be referred to with other things, and says, thou shalt do this. As experienced employee, thou shalt do this, thou shalt do this.
So it sounds more or less like a combination of having your framework, but also having, the policies that enforce the controls, that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So moving from policies to more procedures, and, if you look at the control language, from control procedures to control activities stage, right? So you're basically noting down the control activity portions of it, or the tactical tasks. Hope that makes sense, Keith.
I think that sounds good. Thank you, Shiva.
Thank you for that question, Keith. I think that was good, and I'm hoping that you guys can, stand up and ask questions. That's where the value of, I just don't want this to be a theoretical presentation. Okay, moving on. So you have this framework, and I spoke about this, that, involving these foundational components, people, processes, technology. I just want to, just stop on the people side. So we spoke about this. So far, all that we are talking about is people having subject matter expertise in different areas coming together and being able to write these things or document these things or give guidance for these areas, right? So it's very important for having the right set of cross-functional teams enabled. I want to talk a little bit about that later on in a slide, but it's extremely important to identify a good team and people who would be involved in this data governance activity. Processes. So a lot of this, like what we just spoke about, that, we were just discussing here, we have a process, someone else may have a slightly different process, but the process of taking the regulations, the frameworks, and putting it into more like technical baselines, that's a process. These kind of processes need to be established. You shouldn't be doing it in an ad hoc fashion. The whole idea of the data governance framework and this governance program strategy should be to move to a highly self-correcting level, which is like the level 5 kind of maturity model. Right? Going beyond that, and we're talking about on the right side, we talk about the more of the technology areas. Like, here's on the left-hand side, we have the processes and the people aspects. And on the right side, we have things like data catalog. You need a data catalog, which gives you, where's your data? What is it linked to? Which businesses does it link to? The ability of linking business to the core data that you're carrying. That becomes very important for you to be able to visualize what you want to do within the governance framework. Where is it coming from? Who owns it? Who are the owners? Believe me, that's a very difficult question to answer in our organization. And there are tools available to help. There are processes and there are tools. I think it's also a lot of discipline within the organization that whenever you're getting data, ingesting data, should have processes which catalog all of this. There's also a question of data-centric controls around the data. So data-centric controls means controls which act on the data itself. So encryption, tokenization, obfuscation, like masking, anonymization, and all of that stuff. Then core access controls on the data. Who has access to the data? That's super important, right? Then you have controls like data loss prevention. You have the ability to govern and monitor by logs and monitoring of who's accessing the data repositories. Like, for example, if you have structured data, then you have database monitoring tools provided by the likes. There are several vendors, large vendors like IBM and others who provide that. You got to go into those and have that kind of controls in place. And finally, around governance, it's all good to have all of this, but if you can't tell the story, if you can't go to the executive and say, this is where we are and this is where we want to get to, and this is how much money and resources it's going to take, and that's not going to work because they'll expect you to be ready the first day. So you need to think about how you're going to tell the story and what is the coverage and reporting. How do you show coverage, right? Coverage comes if you have a data catalog, you know where your data is, then you can say how much of controls that I've put on the data. If you know what are the total geographies you're working on, and you can say how many of them you've covered in terms of your analysis to get to your company policies and baselines, and how many are left. That's very important to think that through, right? I want to move to the next slide. Now, once we've got these components, these foundational components in place. Any further questions before we move on?
What about the use of data tagging in order to ensure compliance?
That is one of the things that we have been using, that, from a data tagging perspective, like I believe that you're talking about the data classification within it, that, hey, this is like restricted data, or this is like having personally identifiable information. Is that what you're talking about when you say data tagging?
Yes.
Because data tagging is a very broad subject.
Yeah. So I know in some organizations, they've actually defined certain particular assets, indicating that, like for instance, files, and they'll say, okay, this file has this type of data. Then whenever that file moves from one part of the network to another, and if it's done in an unsecure manner, then it would get flagged and a report will be generated and so on.
Let me ask you a question. How do you track that?
We don't have it right now. I was hoping maybe to get some insight on how to implement something like that, to be quite honest.
So Keith, great question. So there are two things like on data tagging. First is first question that you have to ask yourself is, when you have a lot of data, how do you know what to tag, right? Where to tag, what to tag, and that's the data discovery part, right? You have these automated tools which can go and discover data and look at, things like all the way from regex, or regular expressions, to things like exact data matching technologies, to be able to get to say that, hey, this one has got SSN numbers. This one has got bank account numbers. and tag it accordingly, right? Once it's tagged, then there are a lot of, when you talk about all these data-centric controls, all of these fall on those tags. So you want to protect the core critical data, crown jewels, as they say. Somebody told me crown jewels is a very old terminology, so I'm going to say critical data. So when you look at the critical data and you say that, hey, I want to focus on that one, then you have encryption controls which come in that, hey, if this shows us as numbers, it shouldn't actually show numbers. It should be ciphertext, right? That's number one. So you enable, like if you're in AWS, you can enable Lambda functions which actually do that on the fly. If you're on a mainframe, it's a little more difficult. But there are methods and ways, right? Similarly, as data moves from one place to other, you have the DLP, data loss prevention tools, which you put these policies, which says that, hey, if this person is, Keith is allowed to move this tag data, but Harvey is not. And if Harvey does, then that flags GSOC, Global Security Office incident, which gets investigated.
So
right? Yeah.
Can I interrupt you a second, please?
Yeah.
Good discussion. So 2 questions. One is around tagging. Do you still mean your definition of tagging is what you had said earlier about classifying and categorizing the data?
That is one of the taggings that you do, yes.
And would you care to expound?
So when it comes to tagging, as I explained, that data tagging is a very wide field, right? You can have one of the dimensions is what's the classification of data. The other tagging may be what's the source of data. The other tagging may be what's the lineage, like, who owns that data, right? So all these tags are used in unison to be able to control through the framework that, hey, if seamlessly, if Harvey is a health unit, you are managing a health unit within an organization. Let's say, Keith, you're managing a, let's say, automotive, and somebody else is managing, let's say, sales, digital sales organization. Can each of you share that data, right? So you're going to say there's a tagging which says this is European data also, like geographical tagging. So you can determine that, what are the tags that you want on that data. And some of the common tags include point of origin, geography, what type of data it is, what is the classification of data, and who owns that data. And all of this, like, depending on what type of data it is and which country it is, it may or may not allow you to read the data of the automotive unit or of the, some other unit, right?
So how do you actually tag data so that the identity of it, basically, and the access controls around it follow it and protect it? How is that done?
And I want to talk a little bit about that in a couple of slides later. Is that fair?
That is absolutely fine. Let me talk briefly about DLP. My experience is that it's very easy to talk about data loss prevention in terms of, and you have 2 ways. You can either flag it when data is about to be sent out, or you can stop it. But to be able to actually stop it from being sent, exfiltration, you've got to do a lot of internal work, coordination with HR, with legal, et cetera, to make sure that you can actually do that. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I've heard of situations where you turn on data loss prevention controls and stops a business revenue function, right? Because that kind of said that, hey, I want to stop all of these, in our situation, all these credit reports from going out because these contain PII data. And wow, like, that was where we were earning money. Like, seriously, you stopped that? So yes, got to basically have a lot of tuning and the policies of DLP.
Excellent, thank you.
It's not enough just to put in a tool. Never is.
And just a comment, and probably in reference to what Keith is asking, if I understood correctly, that he's working in the healthcare environment. We do have the challenge in the healthcare environment that we are quickly moving into a REST-based exchange architecture with FHIR. That means we do not have complete documents anymore that we can tag and that have been tagged, but our health data exchanges now work with excerpts, with little decomposed documents where we only send singular data elements, and the problem is simply they do not have a tag anymore, and they cannot simply inherit the tag that the parent document from which this data was extracted has anymore.
So what you're referring to is now, I mean, to get down to the details, like in the health industry, you have these exchanges happening on the REST APIs with JSON kind of constructs or XML kind of constructs. Is that correct?
Exactly. So for instance, now in the pandemic environment, we have document-based things like the clinical document architecture. It's a big compound document like a health record.
Mm-hmm.
But they only want your vaccination data, or they only want your test data. So they will not communicate the whole document anymore, but they decompile the big XML document into just the section that they want, and they just send this off. And in the US with HIPAA, this is not super relevant. In Europe with the GDPR, this is extremely relevant, because if the data that you communicate is not personally identifiable or assigned to a person anymore, then it does not fall under GDPR. So you can pretty much do whatever you want with this. This is for organizations. This is a financial benefit that is huge.
You're talking about anonymization, right?
Pretty much the new definition of anonymization in GDPR, it is almost unusable in practice. So we, to be on the safe side, we also say, we usually say that although we mean that it's anonymized data, we say it's just pseudonymized.
What do you say? It is what?
It's pseudonym data.
Okay, pseudonyms.
Anonymized, right. But it's hard to achieve that, isn't it?
It's easier than because the problem is there is a forward, there must be a forward-facing in time guarantee that the data that you claimed is completely anonymous will stay anonymous, which is pretty hard. So Subo, he put in two very interesting things: machine learning and artificial intelligence. Those tools can recompile from, it looks like anonymized data sets, they can recompile an identity. So it's really, really hard to give this guarantee.
That is correct. And that is becoming a big problem, not just in the health industry, but in any other industry. It's like this, that if you have large enough data sets from disparate sources, even with anonymized data, you can recompile, by using data quality algorithms, you can actually recompile the actual PII data, right? Like, for example, if I anonymized, let's say, Soren, your name versus your address versus your address is somebody else's address, etc. But then I take data from another source, which has some reference to maybe, your license number and the address there. And I can link those together. I can clean up the data and get back your PII data. So I think that's what you're referring to in the health context.
Exactly, right? Absolutely on the spot. Because if this happens, so you have a scenario where you spend a lot of money and effort to anonymize or pseudonymize data, and then you have your business intelligence, your machine learning, recompile the data afterwards. And that is the point when you have to send the breach notification according to Article 33 to the supervision authorities, and you have a big problem. Exactly that.
Yeah, and we've had, interestingly, we've had discussions around this. I don't have the perfect answer. I'd be happy to discuss, with you on this. One of the things that we've been looking at is tokenization rather than anonymization, right? Where you are basically tokenizing the data to an extent. Now, the problem is when you do the tokenization, like down the chain where you're transferring the data, if that person or that thing also needs to read, they have to have access to the token repository. But we are talking about this, especially within the JSON constructs, and basically taking certain elements, not everything, of the construct and saying that, okay, these are the ones that I'm going to tokenize. And then you always have the ability for field level encryption. So here's what field level encryption will enable you to encrypt that data. But again, that has to be usable by the other party. So you're going to come and tell me that what happens if you encrypt it, then the other party can't use it, right? So that's where tokenization becomes better, because exchanging keys on encryption is very difficult. So it can only happen within a closed ecosystem, whereas in an open ecosystem, it's better to have a tokenization ability and a tokenization exchange that whoever wants to decrypt that token can get it. Does that make sense, Soren? Those are things that we are looking at. There's no perfect answer.
No, absolutely. Will you go into detail on that tokenization later in the slides?
Not on this one, but I'm happy to have
Okay.
another session, because I'm supposed to have half an hour on this one. I think I've already used it up. But I'm happy to discuss these with you guys offline.
Cool, thank you.
And we can get another presentation later, absolutely. So thank you. Great discussion. Keep going.
Okay, so I'm gonna, how much time do I have, Harvey?
Minus 30 minutes. No, just kidding. Just kidding.
Realistically.
So tell me, how many more slides do you have?
Oh, okay, that's a difficult question. I don't remember offhand, but maybe about 6 or 7 more. But it could go for 60 minutes. It could go for 20 minutes, depending on where we want to go.
Okay, well, why don't we plan more toward the 20? So what we'll do is, we're about 7 minutes from the top of the hour. Finish it as quickly as feasible, and then we'll take a short break, and then we'll come on and we'll go on to Jeff's presentation. How's that? But this is excellent. Thank you, and I love the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, as you remember, Harvey, you and I, we were discussing that this is going to be, quote unquote, a fireside chat and not a presentation, and I'm glad it's turning out that way.
Yes, absolutely. As long as we can keep the fire contained. Just kidding. Go ahead.
I think that's always the danger, right? Okay, so this is what I was talking about when we said that, we spoke about this conversation that, hey, can we do this alone? How can we get this matrix, this framework? And I think there were some questions Keith had asked. And this is typically a team we put together, right? Look at the number of people involved in this. Business units, very important. We typically, knowing the profile of most of you who are on this call, because we went through all of that, we're more like, staff function. We are part of providing horizontal coverage on whether it be information security, whether it be data protection, whether it be privacy. And then there are the business units. They need to be involved because they know what their clients are looking for and the agreements there. We need legal and privacy to be involved. We need risk and compliance. You'll notice that data protection and information security is kind of sitting on top of each other. They're intersecting. That's not a mistake of the slide. It's deliberate. Because today, data protection, a lot of which I do, coincides with a lot of information security. And in my case, we actually are part within the information security, but in many organizations, it's kind of complementary functions. So this is an interesting thing that, where does data protection end and where does information security start and how do they connect with each other? But what's important is that when you are building a strategy and you're doing all of these framework activity, you must, take a step back and say that, have I got everyone involved? Because it's often, we have a tendency that, okay, we got it, we have 2 or 3 people involved and we are good. But it doesn't work out that way. It doesn't work if you don't involve everyone, right? I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this whole data tagging and all of that. And there was this question that, how does this tagging take place? So what we are looking at, we're still not, we're still looking at stuff, is looking at things like, tools, provided by market leaders, Gartner quadrant leaders like IBM, the Cloud Pack and Big ID and others people. The framework is discover, then protection, integration, data cataloging, the quality and governance, and how you're going to use that data. So one of the things is that talks about this, that you want to bring, I'm going to highlight this portion of their white paper. It's a very interesting white paper. Oops, and to the next slide. I can't highlight this, unfortunately, on this slide deck unless I come out of the slide share, which will make it very small. So first paragraph, I bring your notice to the last portion, last sentence of the first paragraph. As such, it makes sense to bring these silos together to improve data analysis, data modeling, and eventually the use of AI and ML processes creates major efficiency gains, right? All of that's great. You need to know where is the data. What are you going to get together? And what can you not get together? You remember the framework we spoke about? And you remember the fact that we said that you have to discover the data first? These two things are very important. And then you can catalog, which means it's like an inventory, just like you have an inventory of assets like the CMDB and the application inventory, you need to have a data inventory. Some organizations have it, but most organizations don't, right? I can tell you that out of all of you, can I ask this question, open forum, that does any of you have a comprehensive, 99% accurate data inventory? Anyone out there? And if you do, how do you get there? I guess not, out of the 51 participants, Harvey. Okay, so see, nobody has it. So how do you get there? You use, we've seen this, that if you go and ask application owners that, hey, what is the data that you have for the fields that you have? Are they like HIPAA? Are they like, confidential PII data, health sensitive data, European sensitive, China sensitive? You don't get right answers. You can't depend on people making assertions. You need tools. And we are starting to see on the other side, use of AI and ML processes to build better tools to be able to do just that. So I've been looking at tools like, we've been using tools like ESG, IBM, and many other tools around that area to be able to discover where's that data. And I can't stress more on this point, can't stress enough on this point, discovering and cataloging. So you got to build a proper data inventory and then correlate it with business, like all the way from data to where it is, on what servers, to what applications, to what businesses does that serve. That whole continuum has to be mapped. And that's the data catalog. And then you'll know what to protect and the ability to integrate. One of the important things is, once you start doing this under the data governance umbrella, you start noticing that there are like n number of copies of the same data, because everyone decided that they want to have a copy of the data where they could manipulate. And you have a data sprawl, which increases the attack surface of your data, and you're like, super risk situation, because now you have like 50 copies of United States PII data. I'm just giving an example. So how do you stop that? If you discover what it is and you catalog it and you look at where it's coming from, then you can start making sense of it and put some governance around it. But hey, if you want to use this data, we can have technologies like data virtualization and not have copy of data. Just an interesting conversation there. Any questions around that?
Let me just say that I think this is a great discussion, and in my apologies, I did not mean to send a mixed message. I think we need to fully cover everything, so take the time you need here. And I talked with Jeff, and he said he can cover his. And I believe this is great discussion. Get your questions answered, and I love the discussion on the chat as well. So thank you, Subo. Great stuff. Shubo, I'm sorry. Keep going.
Thank you. And by the way, Harvey, you'll have to call out some stuff on chat, because if I start seeing the chat, then it'll mess the screen.
Got it. No worries. So one thing that I did want to bring up that I saw in chat to talk about right now is there was a question about the use of COVID 2019 for data governance, not just privacy, but data governance. And I had responded and said, I thought that the earlier version, I believe 2005, I think, had done more toward privacy. But do you have any thoughts about data governance on in COVID? Shubo.
We are actually looking at the COVID, and we are looking at other frameworks. So I'm not in a position to make an insightful comment at this moment. Maybe, as we converse, maybe 6 months down the line. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you.
So I'm seeing that Ron was saying that we are implementing Digital Guardian DLP just to find critical data and crown jewels. Would love to chat with you on that, Ron, offline maybe, because this just DLP is one way. Data governance tools, what we've tried using DLP. I'm not going to name the vendors, but all the leading vendors that we've tried. We've tried to use exact data matching within the DLP technologies. Doesn't work, gives such a lot of false positives. So how do you guys do that? I'm super interested in knowing and learning from you, and I can tell you what we're trying. So maybe offline.
And Shubo, to that point, I think DLP can help you discover data, but should there not be another primary way to do it with another tool primarily around discovering data and using that as a backup, or what are your thoughts on that? And perhaps I'm wrong.
That's a great point. So I'm going to go to the. Have you read my slides, Harvey?
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you. I'm not always that prescient, so keep going, buddy. You're good. Thank you.
No, I think you were kind of, you're anticipating some of the things that I have.
No.
So here it is. So I took something that one of my friends shared with me from Big ID. This is just one example, right? I'm not saying that this is one, not, talking about any one tool, but it's just, I don't have access to every one of these slides. So I'm just showing you guys an example of what it is. So this is these are a class of data cataloging tools. They call it data governance platforms. There's a Gartner quadrant on it, which does a lot. They go much beyond DLP. And they actually are specialized in interrogating structured and unstructured areas. The problem with DLP is they don't do a great job on structured data. And many of our organizations which are data-centric, I can tell you mine, or let's say a healthcare organization, which is like dealing with tons of data, they would store it in a lot of databases. That's all structured data. DLP won't be able to read that, right? Because it needs, some DLP tools are expanding into that area, but generically it cannot read it because it needs permissions and all of that stuff. So these data cataloging tools do a better job around that. And what they do is, not only do they read the data, but they can correlate the data, that this pattern looks similar to that pattern, say, of that file share of that database somewhere else, and can give you inferences on those correlations. Nowadays, people are using machine learning to train the models to find out that this is PII data and this is not. So that is another enhancement. They're using AI to do clustering and correlation. That's another enhancement. So to answer your question, Harvey, these are the kind of tools that we find that when you talk about petabytes of data, right? We're not in terabytes anymore. We're talking about petabytes of data. There's some terms, when I came to this company, I learned some new large-scale data terms, which I didn't even know existed. So that kind of scale of data, you need these specialized tools to be able to help you to correlate and find out what are your PI data, what's not, in a sustainable manner. You just don't want to do it once, but you want to be able to repeat in case fresh data comes in, right? And then you have, on top of that, you have platforms for privacy protection and all of that stuff, which bubble up that, hey, this is European data. This is your repositories for Singapore data. This is your repositories for Australian data, each which has its own rules. This is the Brazilian GDPR equivalent data, which they have a new regulation coming up. So all of that, these applications can sit on top of it and tell you. And then that enables you, all these controls enable you to have greater clarity on what you can do and what you cannot do. Because if you don't know what you can do and what you cannot do, then you tend to say you can't do anything. As a data privacy officer or a data protection officer, the first thing is don't use the Brazil data, because you can't do it. That's not really true. If you get perfect clarity, then you can. It enables businesses by having this. So there's a whole concept, again, coming back to that, structured and unstructured data, data on-prem, data on the cloud, how you handle these, right? And increasingly, like earlier, we would not have PI data on the cloud, but now with encryption, with new platforms, I'm not going to name them, but having pervasive encryption and all of that, you are able to do that more and more, and that creates bigger problems because the attack surface is larger. So you really need to know where is your data. Any questions? I think I wanted to tell you guys that we spoke a little bit about some folks talked about Archer, etc. So I wanted to give you a canvas of all the tools in the data space. It's an important aspect. It's not the only aspect. Remember, people, processes, tools, and technology. So a lot of the stuff which I'm talking about in terms of discovering and processing data is around the data governance. But you have all these other, we're talking about DLP, like Digital Guardian. One thing that is not mentioned here, I just took this slide from someone else. One thing which is not mentioned here is there's a class of structured data monitoring tools like IBM Guardian and Imperva. They're a class of its own, and they give fantastic insight into what's going on in terms of data transactions. Then data analytics, Splunk, Tableau. Tableau is more like a representation, but Splunk, Cribble, not mentioned here. And then you have machine learning tools like Exadata and other stuff, which do a lot of data correlation. There are some tools being spoken about here, encryption, masking. So these are really the areas: data analytics, encryption, DLP, privileged identity management. They do more than privileged identity management, but CyberArk, HashiCorp, they also provide secrets management and all of that. Cloud platforms, they are providing data landscape, and they have their own tools. AWS has several tools to discover your data. Archer, ServiceNow, IBM is into everything. They can help in terms of controls and assessments and what you note. When you talk about GRC platforms, they are not meant for data cataloging and things like that. They're more meant for control assessments and exception management and all of that stuff. And of course, there are the data lakes. This is kind of your tool continuum. And I think this discussion goes much beyond data privacy and goes into a larger picture. I hope you guys are, find this useful, because this gives you a broader perspective.
I think this is,
So,
Bo, just to your point, I think this is very good. So thank you. Please continue.
yeah.
Sure, thanks. There was someone.
Yes, yes. This is Keith again. So I just wanted to make sure I align with your data points. So from a data governance perspective, you recommend a suite of controls, right? So you'll have a, GRC tool, right, to manage your assessment and exception processing. You will have your data loss prevention, right, to prevent exfiltration of data.
Correct.
But, there's limitations, however, on DLP, from what I understand, from what you're saying, and that it's best to use a separate data cataloging tool in order to isolate data within your network. Is that correct?
That is what we have found, Keith. But, like, not to say that, let's say, for example, McAfee is also looking at becoming like a data cataloging tool too. So they are all blurring the space. So yes and no. Sorry.
Yeah, because I know, like, for example, my familiarity is more with semantic DLP, and they supposedly have a way of, looking into your various, where data is cross-platform, right? So it's not necessarily one type of technology platform, but it could be in shared drives, it could be in, other data repositories, and then, try to, and then give you a report, on that. But it's limited, from what I understand. It's
Yes.
not as robust.
Yes,
And
that's
so,
exactly true. So they're very good on the unstructured areas. Structured areas, they falter. Because, for example, semantic, if you want to go into, let's say, if you want to scan all your Microsoft SQL databases, right? So you would have to run scripts on them to give permissions, and then this could go in there. When it would go in there, is it, when it's searching, so what happens is it searches things like, think of it like this, and sorry, I'm going into the weeds, but this is close to my heart. That, for example, you're searching a table, and within a table, it finds that, hey, this is an SSN number. Okay, that's great. But there's, supposing there is just a reference number and there's an SSN number. So it will probably just tell you, hey, there's an SSN number, but that means nothing, because does that reference number then go to another table? And if you join the two tables together, does it have the name, address, and other PI information, right? So that's where the data governance tools, the data crawlers, they can go in and they can join the tables and find that out. I don't think Semantic does it yet, but I'm not in a tools discussion, but I'm just telling you that those are some of the areas and limitations, right?
no, I appreciate that. One other thing that I'd like to ask, this is more from a conceptual standpoint. So when I was early in my career, we were dealing with Sarbanes-Oxley when it first came out. And a lot of the legal departments, when I was with a public accounting firm, a lot of the legal departments for my clients refused to take a position of, a combination of data elements as being an exposure, but just a single element in itself could be an exposure, and it should be classified as such. So how do you, wrap your hands around that struggle? Because even within HIPAA, if you look at it, if it's a HIPAA limited data set, that only is for about 5 or 6 identifiers. That means 5 or 6 identifiers do not have to be de-identified, but the rest should be. And then you have to put in a data use agreement with the client that you're sending it. And also you would have to engage in of course, send it securely, but you also have to, besides the data use agreement, there's something else, and please forgive me, I'm grasping right now, but hopefully you get my point. It's like, what compromises an exposure, and how do you trigger that knowledge? Because there are some data elements which really could be considered public in nature, but if it emanates from, let's say, an EMR system, you would have to flag it as being, a possible violation. But like I said, like a name you can get off the internet, right? So would that be considered an exposure? I don't know, really. I struggle with that a little bit.
You're not the only one. So it's funny that you mentioned this. Just before this conversation, there was a conversation around Schramm's, which you guys were having. I think Harvey was having with someone, I forget. And I was looking up on the internet around Schramm's because I was not super knowledgeable about it. And I always love to learn new things. And then I found out there that they have a classification under section 41 that there is, two types of data. One is what they call as private information, and the other one they call as non-private information or something like that, right? Maybe someone can help me on that one because I seem to have forgotten already. But the point there being is that if you have a data set large enough, if it's like millions of records of names coupled with certain other characteristics, which are non-PII, which are public, non-PII meaning public. But because there are millions together, that itself, there's a quality in quantity. That itself would be started to be called a data set, which is of importance and should be protected. Okay, so that's one. Second, we spoke about this, that machine learning and AI is making large data sets. If you have large data sets, you can put things together. So if you don't have, let's say, the address and the SSN number and the driving license details, if you have access to large data sets, you can start putting them together using AI. So I cannot comment exactly on the healthcare context, but I'll tell you this, that on a larger data protection context, large companies dealing with large data sets are starting to classify anything which is large data, even if it's public, to have the same degree of data-centric controls, should have the same degree of data-centric controls as what is classified as PII or health PHI information and all of that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it sounds like you contextualize things that based on, a preponderance of a number of records of a certain type, then you would go ahead and apply the same type of, governance requirements.
Correct. That is exactly what we are tending to do, because otherwise, you can't have a perfect answer that no legal department is going to tell you that this element is actually PI data or not. It's always a combination, right? An SSN number by itself is not a PI data, right? But if it had some context, then it would become a PI data. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Some of it is, such as your name, and your name is. But to your point, yeah, it's usually when you put together a mosaic of the data and you get some, as you were indicating before, some toxic combinations of that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The issue about names is, for example, it is reasonably, when you have the first name, last name together, is reasonably accurate. Like, out here, there will be, let's say, you guys are going to find this funny. North America, say Houston, there aren't going to be too many Shubhajit Goswamis, right? So it's kind of unique. So that forms a combination, but there may be collusions also, right? For example, a common first name and last name combination may have a lot of collusions. So those become a subject that, hey, is the first name, last name together PI data? We treat it as such, Harvey. We take it that, yes, it is. But by itself, just a first name, we wouldn't consider that to be a PI data, or a last name, we wouldn't consider that to be a PI data by itself. Right? Okay. I mean, this subject is never ending, I can tell you. But these are, I think, over the next sessions. I think this is a topic of privacy where you you move away from the theory and actually move into practical areas and actually how you do this stuff. And then you realize these are the real world problems. Right. So happy to discuss this as we move forward. Anyways, so I want to talk about something very close to my heart. And, I promise this is the second last slide. Okay. So this digital mindset of the organization, right? We are moving towards a digital world, and it's not the used digital transformation. We often use the term digital transformation. I've been hearing it being used from 2000s, but this is a different digital transformation. I wish there was digital transformation part 2 or something like that. Nobody says that, but it's almost like that. Data is the new currency. It's the new oil, right? And, that is being mined, that is being utilized, that is being monetized. So we play an important part in that. Data privacy, data protection are like brakes of a car. It helps you to go faster. You wouldn't go faster in your car if you knew that the brakes weren't working. Look at it that way, right? So I think we foster and we are part of this digital mindset of the organization. And I think the data governance is a role above privacy, above data protection. It goes above that. It is that controls which safely allows digital mindset transformation to move an organization from what it was to a digital mindset. I mean, look at the companies, look at the stock market of today. Like, let me turn my eyes to there, like the Amazons of the world and all of that. Like a data company in many ways, like digital assets, everything digital, right? And they are, far more valued than many brick and mortar companies today. And that's the way the organizations are going. And I give you an example of that confectionery organization, the little one, and that actually tripled in valuation, right? So this is an example of how the digital mindset transformation is changing organizations, and everyone wants to go there, and we enable it. And these are all the elements, right? These are some of the things that you see. I've tried to put together. Data minimization, this is a stark, interesting contrast. Data minimization versus data value maximization. You don't want your data sets to be like, 50 times copied all over the place, because that destroys value. You want it in source places, and you want the data quality to be high, the concept of data quality. And that's going to create value maximization. The ability to exchange data safely under the data privacy norms, that creates value maximization. So I'm just encouraging all of you to move beyond your functions of just, saying this, thou shalt not do this because of these privacy norms, to thinking about the bigger picture and how you can help your organization realize better value, right? So data sharing and data and business transformation, top down from a strategy and bottoms up from a privacy aspect. And finally, this is what the data business continuum looks like of tomorrow. You're in an exciting journey. Data privacy, we were talking about data privacy being a value enabler for our own values, jobs, etc. I'm talking about data being that, more than just privacy. And you're all a part of that journey. So merging the business strategy, the digital transformation, leveraging the data using AI, ML, it's going to be the future, and data governance to allow that to happen. Data governance doesn't stop it from happening, it allows it to happen. Gentlemen, I leave you with that thought. Thank you for your time. And put this together that I hope you're ready on your journey to the business and data continuum. That's it.
Thank you, Shubho. I think that was a great discussion. I really do appreciate it. Something that has come up here, I think that has been good, is several people have said, hey, I'm trying to do this, having difficulties with it. So give some thought. We may try to do 1 hour once a month on a different day meeting where we just get together, and people who want to share what they're trying to do will do that, and we will prioritize those and try to get it through in an hour. Give some thought to that, and we'll have some more information about that later. But Shubho, thank you again. And now Greg Goins wasn't able to get his get unmuted before, but he's unmuted now. And just after you just give a quick elevator talk here, speech, Greg, then we'll get Jeff on, and right after this, and I'll introduce Jeff in just a moment. Does that make sense, Greg? Does that work?
Yeah, Harvey, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Okay, I'm Greg Goins. I'm with AIG Life and Retirement down in Houston. And we're gonna spin off 18 or 19.9% of the life and retirement from AIG. So we'll be working on that. I've been a CISA since '98. I've been a member of the Houston chapter since at least that time, except when I've relocated out of the city. And I appreciate these sessions immensely because the more we hear and learn from different points of view, the better we are at risk management. And my role right now is operational risk. So that touches everything that AIG Life and Retirement does. And 50% transformation work, 25% deep dives, and then the rest would be considered business as usual operational risk areas. And that's the story.
Excellent. Thank you, Greg. And I'm heartened to see the blue sky a little bit in the background there, because all I see is gray sky today. So maybe there's hope yet. So, or maybe I'm doing something differently. But thank you. And I hope this has been helpful, and thank you for being here today. Wonderful.
Very helpful. Thank you much.
All right. Now, Jeff, if you'll go ahead and get your slides up, sir. Jeff and I have become very good friends. We started working together several years ago at Capgemini and have just continued the friendship. And I would say with Jeff and Shubho and Doug and others that I just can't think of right now, but some who are actually on the call, I love it because the relationship is kind of a mutual mentor, a mentee. We're always learning from each other. And I hope that we all get to do that, kind of a goal of what we all do in these meetings. So Jeff has gone on to get specialized in a couple of areas that I haven't regarding privacy. And he will speak at that at some time or another. But Jeff, go ahead. And we're going to forego the break. And Jeff, just please start on. Thank you, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you for the intro, Harvey. I really appreciate it. And Sebo, I'm very glad that you discussed that crucial topic, that from the top topic of the importance of data governance. If you don't have data governance, you're not going to be addressing data security and data privacy in a really ideal manner. Can everyone see my screen?
We can, but they're small slides. Can you enlarge it somehow?
Okay.
I should have mentioned that earlier, but if that's a way to do it, otherwise it's possible to see it. It's about the same size. Yeah.
Is it near full screen?
No, I don't think it is. Someone else comment. Is it just me, or I don't think so?
What you can do, Jeff, maybe is that you can hit that slide share, or if you go to the bottom right, I found this out by trial and error. Yeah, if you hit that, maybe that'll increase.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, is that better?
Not really.
Oh, it doesn't work. It's become a little larger for me, but
it is larger for you. Okay, perfect.
Perfect for me. Okay, terrific. All right, so anyways, today's discussion is just going to be an overview, a data privacy framework controls, a comparison between NIST 853 revision 5, which was updated this past fall in 2020, Their last update was in December of 2020 versus ISO 27701, which some may know is a extension of ISO 27001 for information security. So the whole idea here is a data privacy framework provides compliance guidance and reduces risk to ensure data safety and trust. So we're going to be going through why this is an important topic. We'll be making a comparison of NIST versus ISM and PIMS, which are under ISO 27001 and 27701. And we'll be going through more extensively NIST SP 853. And again, we'll be going through a bit more detail of ISO 27001 and 27701. And then we'll be discussing certification. So what I put up here is just visualizations to bring to life a little bit more of how to view the relationship of privacy and security. There are so many terms that individuals end up hearing, and it really isn't the fault of audiences to become confused between the difference of information security versus data protection versus data privacy. You have a data protection officer, which is required for the EU's GDPR requirements, versus a data privacy officer or chief privacy officer. So at any rate, if we take a look at these diagrams here, starting in the upper left-hand side, you'll see with privacy, that has to do with GDPR protecting data subjects, data and their rights. And then you've got a overlap into cybersecurity, data security, and security at large. Some of us who've been in information security and data privacy for quite some time will be familiar with the triad of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That in order to be able to ensure that you have data privacy, you have to address ensuring that the data will be confidential through appropriate access control, let's say, and encryption. Integrity would be, again, one of the functions of access to ensure that no one can corrupt the data. And then availability goes back to access as well, and many other considerations. So on the lower left-hand side, you've got cybersecurity risks and privacy risks, and where they meet in between is you can get cybersecurity related privacy events, which we know with data breaches that have been occurring for at least the last 10 years that have been in the headlines and been very costly for organizations. You can't ensure data privacy unless you're ensuring cybersecurity or data security. And then in the middle here, we've got, whoops. And in the middle, we've got the overlap of privacy, safety. We've got trustworthiness. And then on the right-hand side, lower right-hand side, you'll see the GDPR 7 principles. So again, it's not really fair to anyone to go through just dozens or hundreds of controls without taking a top view of an illustration to at least end up showing that these controls are helping to ensure holistically the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data to avoid cybersecurity risks and privacy risks in order to be able to abide by regulatory requirements like, again, the EU's GDPR and its 7 principles. So what I've provided here, can everyone see my screen? And you've got the GDPR enforcement priorities. Can everyone see this? Hello?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, terrific. No, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Okay. So at any rate, you've got international considerations. So I think it's fair to say up until about 2015, 2016, as a result of the Snowden revelations with what US intelligence agencies were doing with viewing data ad hoc, completely end to end, including any data that might be flowing in from EU countries, that until we heard about GDPR, you weren't hearing as much about data privacy. Although privacy by design and data privacy was something that was always a concern for instance, in the US, when it comes to, let's say, protecting health information with HIPAA, data privacy really became a big imperative because GDPR was going to be imposed on US countries that had significant amounts of EU personal and personally identifiable information that was being processed on EU citizens. So the EU now has 27 countries, and the EU has data protection authorities in each countries. So if any citizen makes a claim that their data isn't being appropriately managed, either through appropriate consent, data subject rights, the ability to being able to review it and revise it and delete it and so on, then companies find themselves getting into big, expensive, extensive investigations with those data protection authorities. So this diagram, which could be more clear, I apologize, is from the CNIL. It's the French Data Protection Authority. And they were the ones that were the most instructive, the most informative with actually providing an interpretation of the GDPR and what US companies would have to do. So 2 years ago, they were starting to find that US companies, as well as EU countries, were making a lot of mistakes in failing to provide due care and due diligence with appointing a data protection officer. That's part of a GDPR responsibility, but it goes back to Sabo's discussion about data governance. If you don't have someone who's doing a review of
Hey, how you doing?
If you can mute, please. If you don't have someone who is in charge of your data governance, who's supposed to be being aware of data privacy laws and how they apply to your organization, and you don't have someone appointed, well, that's a big failure when it comes to data governance. The next one would be data inventory mapping. Most companies, and this had come up in Sabo's excellent discussion, weren't doing enough to be aware of what their data flows were internationally, or even really having a comprehensive understanding of all of their applications, third-party vendor risks, where data was flowing within their organizations, be it on-prem, in the cloud, with other applications and database providers and so on. And then performing a gap analysis. And then having prioritization and action plan of knowing how to address your biggest, most extensive gaps in data protection compliance. And then ensuring that you have a comprehensive, credible data security. This is a really important notion because as most people here have a background in information security and auditing it, and we know that that's extensive enough. The CNIL and other data protection authorities found that that was hugely lacking in small, medium, and even large businesses in the EU. And then finally, documentation, lawful basis for processing, and privacy notices. So this is just an illustration of this GDPR enforcement priority really made companies get on the stick about 4 years ago, especially the last 2 years. So over here is a quick data privacy map and examination of the United States. And this is old. This is like a year and a half old. New Hampshire's got one, Virginia's got one now. So it's much more pressing on companies to ensure that they're addressing data privacy laws within the US and again, increasingly internationally. So in my opinion, strong defensible data security and privacy practices help an organization future-proof their risk and compliance burden. So you probably have encountered webinars and brochures and flyers and claims and conferences, e-conferences these days, that organizations want to be future-proof and they want to future-proof the risk and their compliance burden. Of course, all too often organizations just want a single button to solve all that. And it's a very complicated manner. But a data privacy framework helps an organization at least put into practice addressing the aspects of their data privacy compliance and risk requirements. So another driver is industry. So this is a new one. This past February of 2021, for the first time ever in the United States, the state of New York stated that if you're going to do business as a cyber security insurance provider within New York, or, and this would be either you're based in New York or you're actually insuring New York entities, you have an obligation, according to this advisory, to ensure that you have a data security program and a data privacy program that has some rather significant elements to it. And these elements map back to some degree, loosely, to the CIS 20 Essential Security Controls, to 853, and to elements of ISO 27001 for information security and 27701 for data privacy. So you can see what I've highlighted here. Their language is very clear. Whether the insured is conducting penetration testing, vulnerability scanning, patch management, firewalls, malware protection, audits to third-party vendors, really extensive for, again, an insurance commission to make this edict. And then for data privacy programs, they're stating that you have the ability of being aware and complying with applicable domestic and international data privacy regulations and laws. So this has been welcome by organizations that are selling solutions, be it assessment and be it other types of solutions to address gaps. But this is a first, and it's not going to be the last. This is probably going to be adapted by other large states as well as possibly national law, at least when it comes to an FTC and advisory standpoint. So what's an organization to do? Adopting a data security and privacy framework is essential for ensuring data safety and trust, just as the airline industry uses extensive QA, QC, and flight checklists to ensure flight safety and trust. There is the whole notion that a auditor ends up running into this dilemma, and that is a subject organization that's being audited will end up having binderware, and they have a checklist. The auditor and or the entity has a checklist, and there's a lot of pressure to ensure, yep, we're addressing this, we've taken care of that. There's very limited attestation. The whole idea of this is, before these privacy frameworks, there was really no way to organize and structure all the elements of data privacy considerations. There had been theoretical principles of data privacy by design, and there were limited data privacy as it applies to HIPAA. But at least with ISO 27701, which came out approximately 2 years ago or so, and the NIST data privacy framework, which is built in as an annex to 853, at least now we have a comprehensive checklist. And you cannot manage what you do not measure. And if you do not use at least some degree of metrics and a checklist, then you'll never get a handle on ensuring that you're performing due care and due diligence to ensure data is kept private. So this is just a very brief summary overview of ISO versus NIST. So ISO is an international standards organization, whereas NIST pertains to the United States, so it's regional. And that in both instances, they're not regulatory requirements, they're standards and guidelines, which are best practices. And ISO standard control is certifiable audit requirement, whereas NIST is non-certifiable. And there may be some confusion about that, and that is ISO has structured an accreditation body with certification standards for individuals, organizations that are teaching the standards in a formal basis to ensure that they're done in a very structured and intended comprehensive manner that is acceptable to the ISO standards working group that devised that standard. So you have accreditation of organizations that are teaching it. And then you have audit bodies that also are certified. And those audit bodies have individuals who are considered certified subject matter experts as either auditors or implementers of a standard. And then you have, of course, the individuals who are conducting the audits or implementations, and those individuals have to be certified, ensuring that they have a baseline understanding of implementation and or auditing a particular standard. The standard we're talking about today is, again, the Information Security Standard for ISO 27001, and then the newer standard for data privacy 27701. And they make pains to ensure organizations understand that data security is not the same thing as data privacy. Many organizations, as people here who have done significant corporate audits, know that an organization, a Fortune 1000 company, had aimed to ensure they reached ISO 27001 information security certification. It's a very arduous task. It's not easy. It's not inexpensive, and it's not just a matter of a testing on a checklist. So that has been an aim and goal of Fortune 1000 companies, let's say in the United States, for the past, I think, 12 to 15 years. Whereas the data privacy ISO standard 27701 is something that can only be achieved after an organization is already certified for data security or information security. I want to make that very clear. You cannot get ISO 27701 data privacy certified unless you've already achieved ISO 27001 information security certification. And that goes back to this simple concept that you can't have data privacy unless you've got data security. And ensuring data privacy is not the same thing as ensuring data protection. And that goes back to the whole idea of ensuring that data is properly managed when it comes to consent management, that data is being managed from a standpoint of also ensuring availability, integrity, and so on. So let's go on to the next one. So here's a comparison of ISO 27001, again, information security, and it's not in here, 27701 for data privacy, and NIST 853 Rev 5. So this is valuable from the standpoint that ISO uses management clauses, as does NIST, but the control categories, NIST has more control categories, 20 different control categories, or you could say domains, and I'll be showing that shortly. Then you've got subcategories. For ISO, you've got 35 subcategories. In NIST, you've got, 9 times that amount? You've got 321 subcategories. For ISO, you've got 114 total controls. For NIST, you have 1,189. And then for ISO, you've got just over 100 pages, whereas NIST, you've got 464 pages. So that is a significant consideration. The issue with ISO standards is they're not as granular, they're not as instructive as the NIST standards are. The NIST standards are more technical, and you'll see that shortly. So NIST 853 Rev 5, which again incorporates the data privacy control framework in a control listing at the end of 853. It's a catalog of security and privacy controls It's for information systems and organizations. It protects organization operations, assets, individuals, and organizations. It protects organizations from a diverse set of threats and risks, hostile attacks, human errors. The controls are flexible and customizable, and they're implemented as part of an organization-wide process to manage risk. And they've been derived from mission, business needs, regulations, and legal requirements. So you've got 800 standard guidelines that are related. You've got 830, which is for risk assessment processes. You've got 8062, which introduced some time ago privacy risk concepts, which were used as a basis to helping formulate the data privacy framework. 839 provides guidance on risk management processes and strategies. 837, risk management processes. 853 provided guidance on effectiveness of controls. 53B, tailoring the security and privacy controls according to the organization's needs. So I'm just providing here a quick overview of what 853 looks like. I think you know right here, with up to 464 pages, it's not going to be practical or really very kind to you to go through all those pages. So we'll just carry on in an overview. So on chapter 1, they go through information systems, organizations, and individuals. They lay out the definitions and help to define the scope and objectives and the purpose. And again, Rev 5 came out in 2020. The previous release was in 2016 for Rev 4. So in chapter 2, they go through the concepts associated with security and privacy, the controls, the structures of the controls. You'll see that very shortly in a visual table. How the controls are organized into a catalog, the control implementation approaches, and the relationship between security, privacy, and controls for trustworthiness. So then there's the full catalog in chapter 3. So right over here, this shows the 20 different control domains. And the privacy control families, big ones, of course, would be PII, processing and transparency. And that's, again, that's been the big addition at the end annex of this document set. So their structure is very detailed. They lay out the actual control name, then the control identifier, related controls. It's very instructive. You don't get anything quite like this in ISO. So again, you can read this as well as I can. A common implementation where there's a hybrid of mix of both security and privacy, all for the purpose of trustworthiness. Here's an example of a control name, and then this is all the subdomain listings, and it goes on extensively. Awareness and training, for instance. So this is the one domain name where you're doing awareness and training family of controls, and these are all of the 6 main subdomains, 6 main domains rather, and then you have the subdomains. And again, you've seen this before with regards to audit logging and not repudiation and monitoring information and cross-organizational audit logging. Very, very comprehensive. And then you've got assessment, authorization, and monitoring family. And again, you see the control numbers. And you've got 23 subdomains. Configuration management. So, you know, you're seeing this, and probably there's a lot of people here who are familiar with the CIS 20 essential security controls. And an auditor or a information security team member or leader would be really doing well if they could get their teams and the C-suite to really pay attention to those 20 essential security domains. it wouldn't be practical to have everyone understand the granularity of these main controls and subcontrols rather. But certainly this provides much more instruction and assurance that there's going to be enough attention to detail when an organization is, for instance, looking at configuration management and might be superficial in having junior team members saying, yeah, our configurations are all set. We're going into Unix and Windows and making sure there's standardization and we have optimized security. We've turned off insecure ports and services. This is just more granular and is much more helpful for organizations that want to be that detail oriented, which I think we're going to see is going to become more essential and mandatory. So contingency planning, you know, more than just the whole idea of business continuity and disaster recovery, a tabletop exercise, and you're all set. Identity access management, authentication. So again, very helpful and instructive for organization, information security teams, and the internal audit organization to have something like this and to engage their system administrators, their network administrators, database administrators, to ensure that there is appropriate attention to detail when taking a look at their entire server and cloud environment, for instance. Incident response. And we're getting there. Maintenance family. Media protection considerations. Media sanitation opens up a whole discussion as to whether or not there is appropriate due care and due diligence with employing proper erasure, recognized erasure of data that might be across disk RAID sets, for instance. And back here on media storage, you know, consideration might be the discussion about retention. So on ISO 27701 and 27001 and 27701 data privacy, here's a structure of information security and privacy, how both of those standards work together to ensure confidentiality, integrity, availability, and privacy. And they're all necessary to ensure that end goal. So just so you know, when they're referring to ISMS, they're referring to Information Security Management Systems. And again, when they devised and published 27701, it's Privacy Information Management System, or PIMS. And as I stated before, an organization must become 27001 certified prior to achieving ISO 27701 certification. And their standards are comprised of 10 chapters, 7 clauses, an annex, or you could say appendice, that has 14 main categories, 35 subcategories, and 114 controls, as opposed to 1,000 controls plus on NIST 853. So this ISO right here is just giving you an idea that here's a mapping of the data privacy controls structure, the GDPR articles. There are 99 GDPR articles. Those are legal articles that were devised over the course of several years by the EU authority and working group who were trying to address ensuring data protection of EU citizens' data. So all of these little numbers, these little articles, are legal elements that correspond to particular principles, practices, requirements within the GDPR. So this was essential when they were devising the ISO 27701. This was an imperative for the ISO, which is based out of Europe, to ensure they were addressing GDPR. Because if they didn't have that first and foremost, then who was going to establish the standards by which GDPR would be GDPR would use for compliance? So ISO 27701 became the first and to the best of my knowledge, only comprehensive standard that addresses all of the article elements and requirements within GDPR. So finally, we're going to ISO for PII controllers. So a consideration, because most information security auditors, CISOs, for instance, and of course, even their senior security team leaders might not understand the distinction between a data controller and a data processor. And the reason why is that language wasn't used that ubiquitously before GDPR became a requirement for organizations that were going to be held for those requirements. So a controller has a fiduciary duty, has a responsibility, has the ownership of the data that they're collecting and ultimately what happens to it. And although they may send the data off for processing, they're the ones who collected it. They're the ones who are managing it. They're the ones who are storing it. They're the ones who are using it for certain decision-making and are ultimately responsible for what happens to it. So when we refer to a controller, we're referring to the entity that has the responsibility of all the data. So here they, again, discuss identifying and documenting the purpose. Do they have the right to, what are they collecting the data for? And that's an important discussion that becomes part of a PIA and DPIA for an organization when they start to collect information in an application, for instance. Some whiz in the consumer and marketing department says, well, we have a new app and let's collect all the more information in someone's contact lists on their phone. And then we can go ahead and connect it to a data broker. And this would be, again, an important consideration that would be used for an organization to ensure that they're maintaining GDPR compliance. And that is, are you collecting the data for the intended and documented purpose so that way you don't get into trouble with deceiving data subjects, that would be consumers, and you're not going to get in trouble with the data protection authorities. That's just one example. So Harvey had mentioned data privacy by design and data privacy by default. That's an important tenet within GDPR. So an organization has an obligation to demonstrate that they have a mindfulness of what they're using their applications for and how they're organized to ensure that data privacy is not an afterthought, that it has been part of the construct of decision-making with adopting that application and using it and what's happening to the data throughout the entire data lifecycle. And again, big one is sharing data between third parties and other organizations. And again, that was controllers. And then you have processors. So you have to have a consumer agreement. Again, things like this were really never standardized, weren't structured so that information security teams and the legal department and marketing and the C-suite who does the data governance start to have a language with what's going on with data being shared all too often promiscuously between organizations, and no one really knows about it or has documented it. So there's a customer agreement, and that would be the data processor would have a obligation with the data controller. So let's use an illustration. Let's say you're a Fortune 1000 company and you've decided to outsource payroll, which we all know that they all probably do. And they're using someone like, let's just say ADP or another another payroll processor. The payroll processor would be the processor of that data, whereas the controller would be the organization who has the employees and the contractors who they're sending data to a payroll processor to look at the individual's name and to ensure that they're getting the correct paycheck, a cut, and that there is proper regulatory tracking for state taxation, federal taxation, and the ability of being able to track how that money is spent for payroll. So that's, I think, a pretty good example of between a controller and a processor. The company that has the employees and contractors, they're the controller of that data, and the payroll processor is the processor of that data. And that requires a customer agreement that clearly lays that out to reduce ambiguity. So again, right over here, we've got mapping controls for PIA controllers and how it goes from a standpoint of data privacy principles from 29100. And that's just more detail that they provide in the ISO documentation. And then we're wrapping up here with, this is an excerpt or extract from the ISO document. So it's, you know, again, a typical eye chart, eyesore when it comes to controls. And this is only 100 and some odd controls for ISO as opposed to NIST, which is, again, about 1,100 controls when you look at security and you look at data privacy. So when you get the document, you have to purchase the document. I'll go into that later. It's not free from ISO. When you try to pull the standard for 27701, they make mention to, again, a lot of other dependent and relevant documents, security documents within ISO. And this way they want individuals to have a real understanding, not to just have a superficial familiarity with the privacy controls. They want you to dig in so that when you're doing a cloud security, a cloud computing audit, you're going to have an understanding of it versus just not having a familiarity with the concepts and terminology that go beyond just the control itself. Okay, so we're wrapping up. So again, the ISO ISMS is a high-level approach. Part one is the clauses, management's responsibility. So that gets it out in front of the executive team and middle management team when it comes from a data governance standpoint. Part two is operational security measures that are necessary. And then you've got advisories and suggestions for both the information security and the privacy information management. And it all relies on information security first and foremost. And these are the other relevant standards, whereas NIST is highly detailed in all categories. Under ISO 27701, and of course the security one, there's no practical advice, there's no implementation guidance, there's lots of freedom and choice. You have 114 control points and measures. You can plug in any technical and implementation framework to achieve certification if it passes audit muster. And you have to subscribe and you have a license to that particular document. It's not free, and you're not supposed to use it free of charge. You have to purchase it, a copy for each individual. Whereas NIST, being USA, it's in this instance, we consider it more comprehensive. It's extremely detailed, very extensive, well organized, and it's free. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Right here, I provided references for NIST 853. You can get spreadsheets that have all the controls laid out, the separate privacy controls in a separate spreadsheet, privacy framework, cybersecurity framework in a spreadsheet, and then a mapping of that over to the ISO standard in a Word document. And then there's the ISO documentation, and I provided a Microsoft compliance reference. They've done a very good job at Microsoft because they have the Azure Information Governance application, and that has aimed to try to ensure organizations are ISO 27001 information security and 27701 data privacy security compliant. And they've done a good job with mapping it out to standards like 853. All right, I'm done.
Jeff, thank you very much. Really do appreciate that. I think that was an excellent discussion. And go ahead. Somebody was going to say something.
No, you're welcome.
Excellent. No, thank you. I really do appreciate it. And Shubo, thank you. I think we covered a lot of information today. And I think this was a very good restart, if you would, although it's in a different venue webinar to our Privacy Saturday mornings. And just want to thank all of you for attending. And so I will give my talk next time, which is based upon the PDF or set of PDFs, 5 PDFs that I shared with you there in the chat by a law firm that Troutman Pepper that did an excellent job of pulling together a comparison of the CDPA and CCPA and the CPRA. And so I'll talk about that next time, and we'll get some other presentations as well. And we'll just look forward to seeing all of you same time next month. Thank you very much. Stay safe. God bless you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harvey.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And another
Thank you,
Bo, as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Harvey, how can we get the CPEs for the presentation?
Yeah. So very quickly, these slides will be available. I'll figure out how to do it. And I believe Joyce will be issuing the CPEs and we can, I'll talk with her about that. And you should be getting them within 2 to 3 weeks. You should be getting them before we meet next time. And if not, we'll provide some sort of communication.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.